I'm wondering what's going on with Haze. A little concerned, actually.
It's Patrick and Anna.
Yeah.
Either some. Well, I'm thinking, and we can place wagers on this if you want. I'm thinking it's one of three things. Either because he's, I think, in an hour time zone west of us.
Yes.
So
Is he an hour or is he 2 hours?
I think it's just an hour because he's in either. I think he's in Tennessee. So it might.
Okay. I thought he was out west.
I don't think so. I think he's in Tennessee, but. So that's one option. Another one is maybe something happened with his tooth thing or something that he's not in a position to even get in touch with us to let us know that he can't make it. Or he's just really scared of talking to you and me about drums, that it's gonna we're going to know so much more than him that he's just going to be embarrassed, and he's just hiding in his closet right now. It's one of those three things, I think.
I would guess he's just afraid.
That's the most likely out of the three, you think, huh?
We're pretty intimidating.
Yeah, that's true. If we had more people here, I'd do a poll. We could see exactly how intimidating we are. In fact, so intimidating, people probably wouldn't respond to the poll.
Yeah.
So let's. I just went live anyway because I figured why not. Let's talk about drums and drumming. And you started out as a drummer, and you're still a drummer.
Yep.
And how long have you been playing drums for now? It's been like a couple of decades, I think you said.
Yeah, since roughly 1982.
Wow.
Somewhere around in there. When I was in 5th grade.
That's like more than a couple of decades. Yeah. 5th grade. So were you playing like snare drum, marching band stuff, or?
Yeah, I started out snare drum in the school band, and then graduated up into jazz band and playing a full kit when I was in freshman year. And I was in my brother played guitar, so I was in bands with him. Well, I use the term bands very loosely at that point because it was usually just me and him playing songs that we learned and whatnot. We did eventually start a band, but it was mostly school bands throughout my high school.
When you were that age, because I remember when I was in junior high and high school, where you'd be talking with kids in the lunchroom. You say, "Oh, we got to put a band together," and you come up, the four of you come up with a band name, and you're making a logo, and you're making your first album cover, and then a month or two later, you have an actual rehearsal finally.
Yep.
And then you do one rehearsal, and then it's done and over. Yeah.
So I literally lived that story. There was a group. It was me and my brother who actually did play and knew a lot of songs, and then we got another guitar player, a singer, and then we looked really hard for a bass player. They were impossible to find. And we found a bass player and like, all right, this is it. We got ourselves a good rock and roll heavy metal band. And we went down to the local park, dressed up in all of our jean jackets and concert t-shirts, took our instruments and took some pictures. And you still hadn't played at all together. And came back from that, looked at the pictures and said, damn, we look really good. We are going to be a great band. And the next week we started playing, rehearsing, and yeah, we were not not a great band. The bass player had just bought a bass and hasn't even played it until our first rehearsal. The singer looked like a singer, but had never sang before. And the other guitar player was he played guitar, but it was a lot of my brother pointing out, hit that fret there, and then telling the guitar player and telling the bass player, hit that fret. Okay, then go to C. No, hit that fret and that fret. But yeah, totally lived that high school band of doing all the stuff but rehearsing.
Yeah. And then having one rehearsal and then the band's over and all those logos and things are of no value anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, and my brother was a design, and not major because it was still high school, but he did a lot of design stuff, graphic design, and he made this awesome logo for the band. And we spent that week in between taking the pictures and that first rehearsal painting it on my drum head.
So now your drum head has the name of the band that doesn't exist anymore.
Yep. And I actually kept that drum head on the wall of the rehearsal, it's in our basement rehearsal room, but kept that drum head on the wall up until I moved out of my parents' house, which was, about a year after college. So yeah, it got its money's worth, but
Hey, Kat, glad to have you here. We don't know what happened to Haze. We have some theories, though. Now, I was told a story by a bass player I know who actually also plays trombone. She plays trombone in a large band, a funk, kind of band. But she told me about being in a group where the guitar player had a song that they brought in. But then they were playing it, the guitar player kept saying that they wanted something specific from the drummer, and telling the drummer, no, it's got to be, it's different than that. It's got to be something else. And then the guitar player finally said, look, let me show you what I mean. And the drummer got up from the drums. The guitar player sat down at the drums, holding the sticks and looking at the sticks, and then says, I'm sorry, I have no idea what I'm doing. You just play whatever you want. So this thing you're saying about the guy who, yeah, I bought a bass, and then he shows up and says, yeah, I never played it, though. So,
Yep.
The singer saying, yeah, I'm a singer. Oh, you mean I have to actually sing in the rehearsal now? Okay, let's see how that goes.
And I have definitely been in bands where a guitar player or some other musician has tried to sing the drum parts that, I wrote this riff and the drums kind of go like, and I have to interpret that. And sometimes it works, but hearing other people sing somebody else's instrument is always a fun way of trying to get music conveyed from one person to another.
But again, like I was saying before, that's a reason for me why I studied stuff, is because I found that it helps if I can speak the language the other instrumentalists know, so that I don't have to go through that whole, no, it's a bubba dippa dippa thing, not a bubba dippa dippa, a bubba dippa dippa, yeah, not really helping there.
Yep.
Rod Morgan, was it Rod Morgenstein? It was either Rod Morgenstein or Danny Gottlieb. Somebody I knew went to a clinic with one of them, and he was talking about doing a session where, it was like a funk thing, and he's like, boom, boom, bam, 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 and he was like, no. You're playing too much. It's got to be simpler than that. It's like, okay, boom, bam, boom, boom, bam. He says, no. The big drum. Don't play that big drum so much. It's like, okay, so boom, bam, bam, boom. No, the two cymbals are going. And then he said that the guy running the thing looks over at the audience and says, he meant I was playing eighth notes on the hi-hat. So then he gets him playing this beat. Dun, dun, dun. And then this producer said, you play with like no energy.
Yep.
So that was your early experience then playing with bands, which sounds like it was hysterical.
Oh, it was. All the stereotypical stuff that happens with kids and music. I lived all that.
Yeah.
But I did eventually get into better bands, and I would never say I got into a real band because none of the bands were ever working bands in the sense of making any considerable money at it. I was in a band in college. It was a new wave punk band, and we played shows around campus and went to the next city and played shows around that campus and stuff like that. Mostly for beer money or to break even on gas at the very best. But
I still do gigs like that.
Yeah. And when I was full on adult, I was in a band and we worked and played shows around town, recorded an album in a proper studio, all with, money because we all had day jobs. So it was all funded by our day jobs. And that was the only real band, I would say. The bass player was well-versed in music theory. The guitar player was self-taught, didn't know how to read or write music, but he was very proficient. He was a huge Rush fan, and so he was able to write complex guitar parts, but he just didn't know what he was doing, from a technical standpoint. He would write stuff in 5/4 or 7/8, but not know he was writing in 5/4 or 7/8. And the flute player who was lead on that band, she was classically trained and knew a lot of music theory as well. And so that was a really fun band. That's my favorite band that I've ever played with. It was just, I thought we did amazing music.
Is the album up on the web anywhere?
Yes, it is. I could probably dig up a link for that, but the band name is V Prime.
V Prime. Let's remember
it's
that.
Self-titled album. The hit song on it is Alphabet Soup.
And you guys did your own original material, was the whole album?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All throughout my music career, I've been very pretentious. And I always, when I was a young kid, I thought being in a cover band was just a cop-out, and real musicians play their own music. As I got older, I realized, well, no, that's completely wrong. You get money if you play cover music. You get shows, you get called back if you play covers. But I never was in it for the money. I went to school for computer science, got a proper job, and music's just my creative outlet and stress relief. So I can still be very pretentious and not do covers.
Well, there was a big change in how music worked with the Beatles, I would say, in that, or at least that time period, where before that you had A&R people, which stood for artists and repertoire, who would find songs and then pitch them to certain artists, certain singers. But the Beatles were like the first group that was really just doing their own music.
Yeah.
And then that became the standard after that.
Well, even then, the Beatles started out doing a lot of covers. Their first two albums had a lot of covers on them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and even the Stones, I think, did a lot of covers early on. Yeah.
Yep.
But they kind of changed the way people thought of it, and then people weren't looking for bands to rehash old hits, or play other people's stuff. They were looking for groups that were doing their own thing.
Yep.
So did you learn covers at first, or did you just start out playing?
I did learn covers when I was just jamming with my brother. We didn't know how to write music yet, so we would just play, music that we liked, stuff like Def Leppard, Rat, Ozzy. We would learn songs from them and just kind of play them. And after a few years, actually probably about 5 or 6 years of doing that, then we got more into trying to write our own stuff. And those early songs were just silly, but it was fun. It was a good exercise to try to learn how to write. And eventually just started writing more and more.
When you were learning those covers, did you try to duplicate the original drum parts, verbatim?
Yes. So I was, I had taken drum lessons, all throughout school. And so when we did cover songs, I would transcribe the entire song down onto sheet music and basically play note for note. We tried to make the songs sound exactly like the record. And that was a really good learning experience because, it got to flex my, transcription stuff, got to really understand how to write, like literally write the music. And, but just, learning songs like that helped me realize, okay, so this is how a song's supposed to be structured. And, the difference of this chorus versus that chorus and what the drummer's playing in the two, you can see how it builds up more energy in the second time through the chorus because he's adding double kick or whatever.
Huh. Matt Baronello, who was not just the original drummer in Coincidence Machine, but I played with him in a group called Piltdown Man as well, and in Ensemble Uniqua. It's one of the best musicians I've ever played with. But I remember him once going on about the way Ringo played A Little Help from My Friends. And he said for every verse, he plays differently. And it's subtle, but he actually really helps build the song because I may not be getting this right, but I think like the first verse, the hi-hat's just completely closed. Then he opens it a bit for the second verse. And then for the third verse, he adds in maybe more bass drums or more snare feathering or something so that every verse has more going on so that you get a sense of the song building, but in a subtle way just from the drums. I'd imagine that transcribing the whole thing, because most of us, especially who aren't drummers, let's say, you listen to a song and you're like, oh, that drummer just played a backbeat all the way through it. But to transcribe it out, you probably then noticed all of those things some of those drummers were doing. Tommy Aldrich was the drummer with Ozzy, but he wasn't on the albums, though. The first two albums, I don't think, though, was he?
No, he was not. The name escapes me. Who
Same
was?
Here, I don't remember who it was. I remember there was the big controversy because the second album, because they'd gotten rid of that bass player and drummer and replaced them with Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldrich, they were on the picture on the album, but they weren't actually on the album.
Yeah.
Which was kind of like giving his old rhythm section the finger.
Oh, and then later on, he re-recorded I know the bass was re-recorded. I don't know if the drums were, but he re-recorded it so that original bass player on the album would not get any more royalties.
Yeah, in his autobiography, he says the reason he did that was because Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake were those guys, the bass player and the drummer. Those guys were constantly suing him about those two albums, but he said they were getting paid their due. That why do they keep trying to sue for more money when they're getting paid already? So he said he re-recorded it in order to stop the lawsuits, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's telling the story so that he looks most favorable in it.
Yeah, there's always two sides to a story, but
Hey, Poke, how are you doing? Poke Your Eyes Out Radio is here. If you're not following him, you should. And Poke, are you following Kat Lustakai? Because you may want to follow her as well. Poke is going to be on Music Theory Hour. It's going to be like the first week of May, it looks like, because I'm already booked through April. How about that?
Man, you're really booking a lot of people. That's cool.
Yeah. Incidentally, so I have to. Well, I don't think anybody's really here, but I would love to be able to thank everybody from yesterday that because when we raided into Clearo's, and actually I think it was probably Kat. I think Kat wrote, "I survived being told to ask Clea Rose why she's not on Music Theory Hour," or something like that. So Clea, like on her stream, figured out how to find me on Discord and like messaged me, and I messaged her back since then, and we have her scheduled for the last Wednesday in April.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, this is a fun thing, and I'm glad there are people that want to do it. Twitch can be a weird thing. There's some people who love this idea of creating a community and getting involved with other people, and then there's some people who I feel like it's always transactional. Like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I already have more followers than you. Why would I be on your channel? You know, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I definitely like the community aspect of it. And obviously you can tell by how much I had to fumble with OBS to get my stream to work. You know, it's not my forte. It's not my strong suit to stream stuff. I'm more about the community and doing fun things like this. Because if there's one thing that I love to do, I love to talk about music. I could just BS about music all day long.
yeah, same. Yeah. So, you while you were doing this, you were also in. I think you said in junior high was when you joined the jazz band in your school.
Yes.
But in that case, I just suspect you weren't playing things verbatim because jazz isn't played verbatim, right?
Well, yes and no. A lot of the charts that we had in jazz band were almost written out completely.
Oh, I've seen those charts where even the drum parts are written out. Yeah.
Yeah, my Zoom's doing that thing with the microphone again. All right, I think it's cleared. So yeah, a lot of the charts were written out specifically of what to play, but there was some charts that we used that just said keep time for 8 bars, and here's a fill, or here's the hits that you need to do, or you know, just standard jazz type charts. But some of them were written out specifically, so I got a little bit of both. And jazz band was kind of we did a lot of jazz standards, but we also did some pop songs, maybe like big band versions of pop songs like Ghostbusters, stuff like that. Shoot, I can't remember some of the pop songs we did. But yeah, we did a lot of pop stuff and a lot of jazz as well.
Well, there's a kind of, I guess, industry you could call it. There's people who make money writing arrangements for high school and college jazz bands.
Yeah.
Doing stuff like that. Like, oh, you know, Taylor Swift is big. Let's take some of her biggest songs and make big band arrangements of them that we can then sell to, you know, colleges and high schools.
Yep.
And I've been told that they actually, the people who do that kind of thing, they'll actually even think of the levels that they're doing it at. Like, yeah, this is going to be more like junior high people, but oh, they're in college. They may know a bit of how to improvise. Let's, you know, we can put it at this level then. Oh, well, thank you for coming, Johnny. We're talking mostly about drums and drumming. We have Solar Idolator here, and Haze Anderson was supposed to be here, but he's not. I texted him and sent him a Discord message, but I have not heard back, so I'm a little worried about him.
Well, we're coming up on the 1 hour point, so maybe we'll find out soon if it's just a time change difference.
Well, it's 7:15, so if he thought we were going to go on, if he thought we were going to meet at a half hour before, but he thought it was his 7 o'clock, we probably won't see him for 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Johnny Ray, I forgot though what it is you play. What instrument do you play? And so when I was playing in big bands, they would get a lot of these charts from wherever they could. You know, in fact, there was communities on like I guess Reddit and places like that where people would share them, and some of them were you know, more like you know, high school or junior high charts, but I remember that became a thing that I know the drummer would do in that. I would do it on bass as well, but the drummer, especially Jimmy Perrone, he would take those charts where everything was written out, but he wouldn't play what was written. He would kind of see what they wanted and then play that feel, but he would still read the chart because then he would need to know what the hits were. Like if he's got hits to hit with the horns. So he would kind of be reading the chart but not really reading it, if you get what I'm saying.
Yep. Yep. And there was a lot of times I would do similar stuff, usually when sight reading and realizing I don't know what that group of notes is supposed to sound like, but here's my swag at it.
And it's true because I guess because they're writing it out and they're assuming that they're writing it out for possibly like a student who doesn't know how to improvise, so they'll write all the fills in. But
Yep.
if you know how to improvise fills, you could just see that's a fill. I'll just make up a fill here, regardless of whether it's like that or not. The one thing that I did find funny with some of those charts is you might have like a beat and you've got to play it for like 25 measures, but they've just got the same thing written out. There was this
Yep.
guy. I'm trying to remember his name, Tom something. I would see him there and he's playing, but then with one of his sticks, he would put it on the music and he's just going from the bars to keep his place while he's just playing with his other three limbs.
I've never done that, but early on I did have the habit of just staring at the sheet music and, not, I was obviously counting in my head, but just following the music line for line. Even though I knew what I was playing, I was just staring at it to keep my place and where I was.
Well, there's this thing. I don't know whether you've ever had this from that experience, but when you develop this, more of an ability to read, it kind of becomes a habit. So sometimes if we're playing, and me and Matt Klein are using the same stand, he reads everything. So he'll put up a song of ours like Swamp. I have that thing memorized, but I'll still be looking at the music when I'm playing it because the music's there, and that's what I do when music's in front of me is I look at the music.
Yeah, yeah.
So you stream, right, Johnny Ray? I'm trying to remember that too, because I think we just met like yesterday or something. Whether you stream or not, I'd say follow Poke Your Eyes Out Radio because he does do really cool stuff with the modular synths as opposed to the non-modular synths. And follow Kat Lastakai as well. Oh, Haze! Where have you been, man? Okay.
All right, that does it. It was a time difference issue.
I think so. Yeah.
Completely understandable.
Oh, that's right. We probably raided you, and I had to bail right away because I was going to a student. That was Monday, I think, was it? I must have been following you through somebody else. And of course, with this whole Twitch thing, that's the thing that's interesting about the Twitch community. You meet somebody and you're like, "Oh, hey, you're pretty cool. What do you do?" And then they're like, "You know me already. You've been on my stream 3 times." It's like, "What? I have?"
I've done that a couple of times.
Right, I remember now. But Mondays I teach after we're done with our stream, so I usually raid and get to listen to somebody a little bit while I'm packing my gear, and then I have to go out and teach some folk. But hopefully I'll get to actually sit and spend a little time in stream of yours sometime soon. So we're waiting for Haze now. He's going to join us. When he joins us on Zoom, I'm thinking he's just going to pop up right in here. I hope. And then you lurk, right? I actually do sometimes have to lurk on people's channels, but I always like being active in chat if I can, and I'm so surprised I haven't gotten banned more often for it. Yep, here we go. Haze Anderson is joining us.
Awesome.
Haze is also a drummer, but follow Solar and Haze. Haze on his streams, though, doesn't usually do drums. He'll usually do stuff with building things, doing different synthesizer things. Haze, so did we have were you thinking it was in your time zone when we were talking about the time? Oh, maybe he can't hear us yet.
No, yeah. What was the question?
Oh, did you get the time zone wrong? Is that why you're late?
No, I'm a big jerk. That's why I'm late.
That was not one of the three things we thought might be the reason.
Nope, that was
This
not.
is this is the typical. I'm late for rehearsal. Man, I was sitting here saying to myself, "There's something going on today. I don't know what, but there's something going on. I'm busy every day of the week, and I'm glad you picked tonight because it's the only night I'm not busy. So I'm sitting here like going through. Hey, let's look at some browsing Twitch streams. Oh, Jimmy's streaming.
And Jimmy's streaming with me. Wait a minute.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
We were assuming it was either a time zone thing or that there was a recidivism in your tooth, that something went on with that, or that you were just scared that you were going to have to talk about drums with Splar.
Well, yeah, no, just completely forgot. And I'm trying to figure out how to unblur my background, but I can't.
Oh, I thought you did that intentionally.
Well, I did.
Oh, but you can't figure out how to undo it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that thing during the COVID quarantine where there was some lawyer that had to do a deposition and everything was being done on like things like Zoom. But one of his kids had done a filter so that it made him look like a cat, and he didn't know how to turn it off, so he had to do the deposition looking like a cat. Yeah, good times, okay. Right? Yeah, that's funny because, I know that there are the band leaders, the bands I've been in where the person running it would be like, yes, rehearsal is on Saturday at 3:30, because rehearsal was actually at 4, but he knew that if he said 3:30 that people might get there at 10 to 4.
Yep. Yeah, I have a good buddy of mine who his band used to do him that way as well. They would always tell him it was an hour later than it was in hopes that he might show up no more than an hour and 15 minutes late, hence only 15 minutes late.
That would be a good rule, Awood. Thanks for the raid, Awood. Everybody follow Awood. Awood was on here 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. Great, wonderful to have him as a guest. Awood, talk about a guy that knows some music theory. That real guy has some theory chops. Wonderful piano player. And
That's
Awood,
where I was for the past 20 minutes, was watching Hayward. He's probably going, what?
So, and you may want to follow Johnny Ray Price and Poke Your Eyes Out Radio, Awood. I'm certain you've already followed Kat and have probably unfollowed her already. Yeah, but that's Poke. You could be on Awood's channel. That's fine because you weren't scheduled to be here. So let's start out with this question though, because both y'all are drummers. I know. Which one of you do you think is better? Which I know is probably a tricky question because you're both pretty sorry.
Well, let's get into. Oh, well, I think you answered the question right there.
So what are we were hearing about Splar's life in drums. What Haze, when did you start drumming?
I started late, at age 17. I know a lot of people start a lot later. I think there's certain like kind of watershed periods when you start playing drums. You're either like really young, behind those people, or way behind everybody else. And so, but it's never too late to start playing drums. And one of the things that I would always do is make sure that everybody in my band could at least tap their foot along with the rhythm.
Huh.
Yep. So in other words, it's kind of like, it's my job to keep the beat and everything, but it's your job to know which one is 1, which one is 2, which one is 3, and which one is 4. We're lucky, maybe we can get to 5 someday.
I subbed a couple of times with a Led Zeppelin cover band, and they used to do 4 sticks, which is in 5. But that starts on a pickup. It actually starts on beat 4. That rhythm is 4, 5, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 5.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
They didn't know that. So they would count 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, and it would fuck me up every time because that's not one, man.
Yeah. They evened it out somehow. I had a friend of mine who used to count 5-4 like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's a guy who did that in a jazz group I was in, kind of an avant-garde thing, but he had this tune that was in 5. And I was playing bass. He had me just playing quarter notes, boom, 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 boom. And the drummer had a simpler part too. And I remember we started playing his tune. He was a trumpet player, the guy who wrote it. And then he stops and he goes, no, it's in 5. And me and the drummer looked at each other thinking, we were playing in 5? It's like, okay, let's do it again. So 1, da, 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 boom, 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 boom. He stops. He goes, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we kind of looked at each other knowingly thinking, oh, he means it's in 6. And then we just, played it that way, and then that solved the problem. Yeah.
Was he paying?
No, what's funny is it was the drummers group. The drummer was a brilliant composer, played piano really well, and I think he felt, rightly so, that in order for us to show up and play his tunes, maybe he should open up that we could bring in some tunes, me, the trumpet player, and the sax player, so that we would feel like we were part of the band, rather than his hired sidemen who weren't actually getting hired, like who weren't getting paid for being there. So all the three of us each brought a tune in, and that was the trumpet player's tune. Yeah, he ended up getting kicked out of that band fairly quickly.
Or trumpet players.
Yeah, not just for that reason, for a whole host of reasons. It just wasn't
Cocaine.
working with that guy.
That's what trumpet players are known for.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know that he was doing cocaine, but looking back, I kind of might now think maybe he was doing cocaine.
Do you know that he wasn't?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And his behavior was erratic. That was one of the reasons why, Dave finally had to let him go. Yeah, that might have been it. I just thought he was messed up somehow, but he might have been chemically messed up.
Very interesting.
So then you started at 17, and what did you start playing? Iron Maiden and Ozzy and Rat covers?
Very interesting. That is so funny. So I was in the marching band. So I had a network of people. And some of the drummers liked me well enough. I remember at one point, one of the drummers who was a year younger than me, here's the best part. All the drummers went on to be guitar players, and they needed drummers. So there was like this really cool evolution. That while all of that was going on, all of my neighbors and peers who were like skateboarding punks, some of them were starting to form punk rock bands. So there was so much going on at that time. And then on top of all of that, I had my super nerd friend I got to tell you this story real quick. Sorry. This is so amazing. He was 15 and could play Jimmy Page, Eddie Van Halen, Alex Lifeson, no problem. His teacher was Roland Gresham. If anybody knows who that man was from Tennessee, he was a great blues man and jazz man. One day, my friend Stefan decided to go take lessons from this man. His parents were rich. He had a nice Gibson Les Paul. He had all of these cassettes of all these bands. I went over to his house one day. He's still like 15, 16 years old. And he had gotten rid of all of those cassettes and replaced them with nothing but bebop jazz. John Coltrane, Monk, all those cats. And it was amazing. So he is the one who helped me really want to be like, at least try to learn jazz. Of course, he warned me, he said, you'll never be able to play jazz. Sorry. But thanks for the encouragement. Yeah. But at least I could play rock and roll. So I was just well-rounded. And of course, Iron Maiden was one of the bands that, yes, absolutely, I wanted to play some of their stuff. But the very first song that I played in a cover band, I remember, was Crazy Train.
Nice.
And it was with that drummer I was talking about that was playing guitar. And he taught me how to play Crazy Train on the drums. It's pretty cool.
That's funny because before you got here, Splar was saying that he started out playing things like Ozzy and Maiden and, playing the drum parts verbatim off of the recordings.
Yeah. So being able to read music, all I had to do was get a book, listen, and I was like able to kind of figure out things like, oh, look, they keep hitting the bass drum every time they hit a crash cymbal. That's interesting.
kind of like exactly what you did too, Splar, right?
Yeah.
Starting to notice these things.
How old were you, Splar?
So that was probably about 12 when I really started playing, but probably more like 13 or 14 when I was starting doing that type of cover stuff.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. And were you in the band, in the marching band or anything?
Yep, marching band and then
Oh,
jazz band in high school.
playing drums?
Yes.
Oh crap. Yeah. That wasn't me.
So, but there's
That's awesome.
an interesting thing that comes from you guys. I think this is true of any style of music and any instrument, is that very often we start out not creating but emulating and learning what other people do, and then learning things like that. Like, oh, the crash cymbal doesn't sound so strong. Why? I mean, I remember being in this band where the drummer one day came in and said that he'd realized, oh, if you're going to play a ska beat, you have to hit the bass drum with the snare drum. That's how they get it to sound so big. So discovering those things, and then they become sounds. So
Yep.
did listening to different genres help you with that, where you were able to take things from certain genres and bring them into other places?
Oh,
Oh,
big time.
yeah. And not only that, it allowed me to, people wanted me to play with them. Like the more well-rounded you are, the more music that you can play, just the more people want to play with you.
True. Yeah.
And drums, I think, are a little easier to stretch across genres because it's a skeletal type kind of thing, right? It's a very sparse. You can fill it up with as many notes as you want to, of course, but there's this sort of underlying structure. And like once you learn just like some Latin rhythms here and there, and once you learn how to swing, you can kind of apply anything across the board in a way. If you get those two things, like the syncopation and the swinging, probably the two hardest things.
And this is something you hear in some of the earlier bands and people like Ringo, Ginger Baker, and that they were listening. Mitch Mitchell, of course, that they were listening to more than just the music they were playing, and bringing in some of those influences sometimes. Like you listen to Mitch on Manic Depression, he's playing like it's a jazz tune.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of those early psychedelic drummers were jazz drummers who were playing rock and roll.
Yeah, there is something happened in the mid to late 60s that kind of put a rift where at some point, I mean, up until that point, pretty much all drummers, the only thing that there was to really learn how to play was jazz and to swing, if you think about it. And then sometime, when rock and roll, of course, hit in the 50s, but like the impact really didn't happen, I think, until Ringo Starr and Keith Moon and John Bonham later. When those cats started coming into the picture, drum teachers stopped teaching students how to play jazz, I think.
And Johnny's saying that Bonham was very jazz influenced. And I'll tell you, I heard a bootleg of Led Zeppelin where when they were playing Moby Dick and he went into his drum solo, he starts playing Max Roach's The Drum Also Waltzes, and then goes into his own thing from there. And I remember hearing that thinking, wow, I didn't know Bonham listened to Max Roach, but apparently, yeah, Bonham was a big fan of a lot of those kind of drummers.
I think all those drummers, for the most part, were. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
there was to listen to in their day.
Let me ask you this question. Who do you think are, let's say, 3 to 5 of the most influential drummers in your mind?
Well, that's a really tough one because I haven't kept up with what's been influencing in the past 30 years or so.
That's kind of like what I was saying in your mind. Like, so
Sure.
it's, of course, only the people you're familiar with. Yeah.
But I mean, like, there's definitely like the drummers that I think should be listed just because of their accomplishments. But then it's more like, okay, well, who really influenced? So obviously, some of the biggest influences were like drummers like John Bonham, of course, and Keith Moon, and even Neil Peart. Like when you would go to a Rush show back in those days and you would kind of look around at the crowd, you just see a bunch of this. Every time there was a drum
Yep.
fill. I'm sorry, I'm left-handed. Got to go this way. So, in terms of like, it's two kinds of influences, like, drummers that really influence drumming itself and drummers that influence people do want to play drums.
Hmm.
So, in terms of like, like some of the most influential, probably I think the most influential drummer out there, I think is Vinnie Colaiuta.
Huh.
Ooh, yeah.
Johnny
Yeah.
says Bernard Purdie, and I think that's one of those things where I think you're right in terms of he's a big influence in that he's one of those guys that I think people would be influenced by even if they didn't know they were influenced by him because he was on so many sessions. The other guy, Steve Gadd, is like that too. I think.
So
Yep.
yeah, yes, session players. That's what that's
Yeah.
the common theme here right now is those are like session players are the ones who really carry forward like the avant-garde in a sense, like the respectable voice of the drum in the music community. I think are session drummers.
Hmm.
Yeah, when you talk about pop music from 60s, mostly 70s, uh, and you hear a really good drum beat, that's just a session drummer. And
Mhm.
probably Bernard, Steve, or
Roy Haynes, no, no,
Roy.
not
Uh,
Roy Haynes, but I'm trying to think. It was Elvis's drummer.
oh, yeah.
Somebody in
Yeah.
chat will find it for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Chad, get to work. Do something to help out a little bit here.
I can't think of his name right now, but that guy was huge. Elvis's drummer was a huge
Yep.
session drummer.
Hmm. And back then, a lot of the session drummers were jazz drummers, basically, who'd studied jazz and then went into session work. The guy who did all the Beach Boys things, Hal Blaine?
Hal Blaine. That's what
Hal
I'm thinking.
Blaine.
So Hal
Yeah.
Oh,
Blaine.
he
Yep.
was Elvis's drummer?
Yes,
Oh, because he also
Was he
on almost all
was
the
he
Well,
Wrecking
later.
Crew?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that later on, I'm like, somebody look me up on that one. I'm pretty sure like he wasn't Elvis's first drummer, of course.
Okay.
But like later on, he was the one that went on tour with him.
Oh, because but he was a jazz guy, but like James Jamerson, the bass player too, jazz guy. But you didn't make so much money playing in jazz clubs. You could make a lot more money playing, pop sessions. So
Yep.
Right.
they just played those things for the bread. But
Yeah, I think those guys found out that you can make a lot more money doing session work and staying at home,
yeah,
and rather than touring and not making as much and being away from family and all
yeah,
that.
or being out
Sure,
until
but
2 or 3 in the morning, playing gigs. You'd
but
be
it
home
ain't
by
it ain't an
6 o'clock.
easy gig to get though. It's like
No,
it's
it
good
is
work if you
not.
can get it.
And that's why the session drummers are like, what, a handful of them that everybody knows their name?
There's
Yeah.
usually one. That's the thing. There's usually one. Right now, I don't know right now, but at least it used to be Josh Freese.
Oh,
He
yeah.
is. Yeah,
Yep.
he was the man. He was Hal Blaine of the early 21st century. Right now, I have no idea what's going on with music. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, do we even need session drummers anymore?
Well, that's the sad thing, I think, because a lot of the stuff that my students learn, there aren't so many live musicians on it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
You got somebody programming it, or, they
Yeah.
got somebody who'll come in and play, and then somebody else, the producer, will come in and fix what that dude played.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of
Two more
sad,
names.
too. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, two more names. Jeff Porcaro,
Oh,
if he were
yeah.
still alive, would be much more of an influence. And Steve Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Steve Smith is huge.
And Johnny Ray's saying Clyde Stubenfeld and Jabo Starks, which, yeah, as far as funk drumming, everybody was going to those two guys to learn their funk beats.
And I got to say something about Bernard Purdie. I think he really thought that he did play on a Beatles
Oh,
track,
but he didn't.
but he actually didn't, right? But he
Yeah.
played so many sessions that he probably got them mixed up somehow, or maybe you know what? Maybe he did, and they just didn't use it or something.
No,
Or maybe,
there was a
or
thing
maybe
I
it was
read where the
Go
guy
ahead.
was doing the this guy did the research and said, that they've got the evidence that song was recorded at this date, and they've got the evidence that Bernard Purdie was on this gig in this other place on that date. So it's like he couldn't have done that session because he was in another country that evening. So he did not play on those Beatles sessions that he thought he played on.
I don't hear it. Not saying that I have that kind of discernment, but I don't hear Bernard Purdy on any of that stuff. Sometimes I think I might hear Paul McCartney.
McCartney, according to him, played on 2 tracks, Back in the USSR and Ballad of John and Yoko.
Yeah, they're pretty sloppy. And it's not that Ringo slop because that ain't
But
slop. That's
I like the groove on Ballad of John and Yoko. I think that
hey,
track just holds together.
if
Um,
it I like all grooves if they get from the start to the finish. It's a ride, you know what I mean? Like I like punk rock. So, like a God Above Voices, for example. If you ever listen to God Above Voices, those are some really rough drum tracks sometimes. Like
oh,
they're just like about to fall apart, man. But there's a charm to it.
yeah, I was gonna say that has a feel like it was actually a bass player, but he was a guy that was doing karaoke gigs. Apparently, for karaoke, they couldn't get the vocals off the original recordings. They would just hire a band to re-record the song without the singing. And they asked this guy, with all of those things that you have to play in your karaoke gig, what's the most difficult thing it was for you to recreate? And he said, "Oh, definitely Nirvana." And everybody's like, "Nirvana? Nirvana's such a sloppy band." And he says, "Exactly. I don't know how to play with that kind of slop and make it feel like that."
Yeah.
He's got to listen real hard.
Yeah, that intro guitar riff for Smells Like Teen Spirit. Everybody knows what the notes are, but getting that strumming pattern down and making it sound like the record, it's next to impossible.
Yeah. And it's not because it's so accurate. It's precisely because it's got this inaccuracy in it, but that gives it the feel that it's got.
Yep.
If they use session musicians on Smells Like Teen Spirit, I suspect it wouldn't have been as popular.
Yeah, you're probably right about that.
I'm probably
So
right about
that's
most things, yeah.
Vinny in his most recent interview.
Sorry, Haze, go ahead.
That's fine. That's fine. It's the lag. It's the lag. So Vinny in his most recent interview that's up on the YouTube was talking about that. I don't remember exactly when this happened, but he was recording a session and he looked over and he saw some intern. Basically, what the intern was doing was he was moving all of the snare drums to the grid.
Oh,
And Vinny was like, "Say, hey, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, I'm correcting the snare drum hits." It's like, well, "I did that on purpose. You want to do that right now. Like, why don't you just get out of here?"
both Jeff Emmerich and Brian Eno have talked specifically about that. They've both said, and not together, these were separate interviews I heard with them, that once we had digital and they had a grid, that kind of ruined a lot of the feel in music because then they would do exactly that. The snare drum's behind the beat, and they're like, "Oh my God, this guy, every time he hits the snare drum, it's like it's behind." Yes, because that's the feel. And then when you start correcting it, you're basically taking human beings and trying to make them sound like machines.
Now,
Um,
I don't like to do it, but like a lot of the recordings that I did around 2009 and 10, every single song I had a mistake somewhere, like one wrong note somewhere, and we would correct it.
Yep.
I don't mind. And these are demos anyway, so I don't mind that so much. But that's the only thing that we really touched. You know?
I think you have to kind of weigh it. Like we did a recording. There's a recording I had done where the drummer didn't get the rim shot clean every time. Now I could have taken one that he hit great and just post pasted that on all of them, but then again, now it doesn't sound like we played it live. It sounds like a virtual instrument. It really is a virtual instrument at that point.
Yep.
But the ones that were really like where you didn't even hear it, I'm like, let me put it there and there. But then some of them I left them so that it sounds like human beings.
It's just the same thing as punching in. In drums, we could never punch drums in back in the day.
Yeah.
And now we essentially can do the same thing. So like that's the big question, like will you still punch in to correct a mistake that you made? And I'm not talking like, like it really sounds bad. It's like we would really want to correct this wart.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, well, okay, this doesn't sound good. But then when you start getting to where I'm going to make everything squeaky clean, is that the
No,
sound you
no,
want?
you got to do a new recording. Got another take. And
Yeah,
that's kind of
or
lacking right now. People don't just like, do a whole take. You know what I mean?
or leave some of the mistakes in. I heard a story that Steve Albini, when he was recording a Bush album, they came in and played at the track, and then Albini said, if they said, well, how did it go? He says, you played it perfectly. You got to do it again. Like, you didn't play any mistakes. You've got to play it so that you sound like a fucking rock and roll band, you know?
Well, Guided by Voices got them back because what they did to Steve Albini was pretty kind of rude, actually. Like he recorded them, and then they basically just took his recordings and ran them through a 4-track and just screwed them all up. And that's what they released.
So I'll tell you one quick thing before I bring this question to Splar. I think it was 2009, I saw Jeff Beck at what used to be the Fillmore East. It's it's called I can't remember what it's called now. And the drummer was amazing, and I was like, "Who is this guy? Where did Beck find this guy?" And it was only at the end of the show that he's announcing the band, and he was like, "On drums, Vinny Colaiuta," and I'm like, "Oh, this is why all my drummer friends keep talking about this guy." He was as much of the show as Jeff Beck was for that show, I felt.
He also played with Brother to Brother.
He, of
Live
course,
Inside My
was
Shell.
with Zappa back in the day. I saw him again with Sting, but you could tell with Sting he was kind of told what to play. It seemed like more to me. He wasn't being Vinny. He was just, kind of playing, this is what was on the studio version of this song. This is what was on
What tour did he play with Sting?
Yeah.
This was the one where Sting and Peter Gabriel did a tour where they were both headlining. And
Okay, I saw that show.
Oh. Yeah, that was Vinny
I've
on,
been
at
to
least
quite
on
a few
the
Sting
Shawshank.
shows.
That's the only one I've been to, and I was there more for Peter Gabriel than Sting.
Same.
I would same. Although I've grown to have more and more of an appreciation for Sting over the years. But what do you guys think about Gino Vanelli?
Who?
Gino
he's-
Vanelli.
He's that actor that played in that mob film, right?
No, he's the Italian-Canadian pop star.
I don't know
who
Gino
sang,
Vanelli, so that's what I think about him.
He had a couple famous hit songs, but here's the best part. Like I'm a huge fan, and then I found out his drummer is Vinny Colaiuta,
Oh, nice.
and it was about the same time. I think did he record with him about the same time he was recording with Zappa? Actually, he may have moved from Zappa to Gino Vanelli. I think actually.
Huh. Oh, Humane Colors is here. Everybody give them a follow, too. This is late for you, isn't it, Humane Colors?
It's very late. Must be like 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah. So, Haze, who do you think are some of the most influential drummers?
Yeah.
No, not Haze, Splar.
I was going to say,
The most influential? I mean, definitely in the rock and roll realm, it's Neil Peart, without a doubt. But my most influential is Terry Bozzio, mostly because of his work with Zappa.
Okay.
Um,
He had that group with his wife they were kind of like
Missing Persons.
Yes, that was like clever pop music.
Yeah,
actually
and
kinda liked them back
they
then.
have some really good records as well.
Yeah.
And so the drummers that I like a lot are Roger Taylor, what's his name? Nico
Nico
McBrain from Iron Maiden.
Roger
And-
Taylor's from Duran Duran, right?
Well, no, Roger Taylor's
from,
Queen.
Queen, okay. Who is
The
Duran
thing
Duran's
about
drummer?
Roger Taylor is, to me, he very often, like, to me, it sounds like he's got some chops and some technique, but there's times that he'll play the simplest fucking thing. Like, the beat for Another One Bites the Dust.
Yeah.
That's like the beat you learn when you're a drum student, but he knows that that's what's appropriate, and he makes it feel really good.
Yeah, to me, Roger Taylor is very much along the lines of Ringo, where at first listen, you're like, oh, that's simplistic drumming. But then when you really dive into it, you realize, well, there's a lot of nuance there that you don't hear. And it's all about the feel and how it fits the song and just a different approach.
Do you guys know who Larnell Lewis is? Because Tim Kellaway is saying Larnell Lewis is great, and I think it's a made-up name. I don't think there's a person named Larnell Lewis.
Probably
That sounds
he might be Australian, but what I love about Roger Taylor's style is he loves to like open the hi-hat when he hits the snare drum on a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. That It's really cool. Very, very unique. Who else? Mr. Solar Idolator.
I agree with
Um,
Tim. Both Tim and Johnny have both said Ringo is great, and like, okay, so when
Ringo's fantastic.
and of course, Awood is right. Animal, probably
Animal.
one of the
Well, yeah, animal.
complete
animal,
different level
definitely.
from these people we're talking about. Yeah, but
Now we got to talk about Vinny Appice
Vinny or Carmine?
and Carmine. Carmine, of course, but like,
Yeah.
Vinny. Wow. So I kind of think like Vinny, like Roger Taylor is kind of like the sort of Tommy Aldridge kind of like predecessor of heavy metal in a way, in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, I could see that. So yeah, a lot of the metal drummers, early metal drummers are where I would put a lot of influence. Tommy Lee was a big one for me.
Wow.
Now,
Okay.
now I realized that later on in his career, he became very different. But I'm talking like the first two records, the Too Fast for Love, the Shout at the Devil, that era. His
Even Dr.
drumming
Feelgood.
was just, yeah, Dr. Feelgood even. His
Start
drumming
My
was
Heart.
just great. He was a basher. Well, I'm sure there was technique to it, but there was no obvious technique. He was just a basher. And then when he came out on the Theater of Pain tour and his drum riser went upside down, that was game over. Everybody had to just say just how great he was at that point, because doing a drum solo upside down, you can't beat that. You really can't.
what do you guys think of Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction? Because Furfer was mentioning him.
I actually saw him play live in the club where I played with many bands at least 50 times prior to all of that. What I will say about Steven is this. He does not play to the room. That's my only criticism. He did not play to the room. He played as loud as Tommy Lee plays in a small, small club. It was filled with a lot of people, but that was the loudest drums I ever heard in that venue.
Was
No
that with
mics.
Jane's?
No, it was with a band called Banyan, which was Mike
Okay.
Watt's side band.
Yeah.
And Mike Watt was out sick in the hospital. He almost died that night, Mike Watt, bless his heart. And he was out sick and they played the show anyways because the show had to go on and he was, in the hospital while they played the show. Crazy stuff, man. Rock and roll, man.
Yep. Yep.
Tim Calloway mentioned Joey from Slipknot. I'll tell you something. I was at an Ozfest when Slipknot was on the side stage because they weren't that popular yet. And to me, that was the most amazing thing because that was like such an aerobic workout watching that guy play drums with Slipknot.
It really was. Yeah. I saw that Ozfest as well. And that's the only time I've seen Slipknot. And I was blown away by them. I remember at one point in time, I think every single one of the band members was playing a drum.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Awood says, "What about the guy from Tool, Danny Carey?" Now, first, the reason I want to bring this up is because I would have had no idea that Awood even know who Tool was. So props to you, Awood. I recently saw Danny Carey with Adrian Belew's King Crimson revisited thing. He has
nice.
Danny Carey playing drums and Steve Vai playing second guitar. Really good show.
In 1994, I went to Lollapalooza in Nashville at an old club called Starwood Amphitheater. It was an outdoor.
Who was
venue.
headlining that year?
What's that?
Who was headlining that year?
It was, I believe, Primus.
Okay, I
And
saw
Alice
them
in Chains.
twice on that tour. Yeah, that was
It
a
was
good
Alice
tour.
in Chains and Primus.
Yes.
So Babes in Toyland were playing, and that was some of the worst stuff I've ever heard in my life. I'm sorry. So I looked at my friends and said, "Hey, why don't we go check out the side stage?" Yeah, let's go check out the side stage. We're walking around, and then all of a sudden, some guy comes past us juggling chainsaws. Now, the chains were probably taken out or something. I'm sure, for safety, who knows? But he was juggling gasoline running chainsaws, 3 of them. "Hey, everybody, follow me to the Tool show," like the Pied Piper. And we all followed him. And Tool was playing on the side stage. Oh, I got to see Danny Carey like in 1994. He blew my mind away, man. Just utterly, that band totally floored me. And I was like, yeah, I'm not really much of a Tool fan, honestly. But like Danny Carey is like he's a guy who studies progressive music, studied all the stuff, and what he's trying to do is he's trying to incorporate a lot of polyrhythms
Hmm.
in a musical way to the music. And in many ways, he's a lot like Terry Bozzio right now. I think the two of those guys are what they're doing is very, very, very similar. Terry's a little guy, Danny's a big hulking guy, but they basically kind of do the same thing. Of course, Terry has a drum set that's a 100-piece, 100 pieces drum set.
Yeah, I've seen photos.
Yeah, watching
I would
him
have,
play that is just, it's weird.
yeah, I've seen him live. It's overindulgent in a way. It's like it's not pretentious, right? It's just that it's so intellectual that it starts to lose. Okay, man, just give me a groove, man. You know what I
Yeah, exactly,
mean?
exactly.
Right?
This is what I
You
was
build up
saying
so
about
much
Roger
tension,
Taylor.
you got to
though,
have a
and
release.
by the way, hello, Andrea Cannon's here. Everybody give her a follow. We're hoping to get her on Music Theory Hour someday. She's been harder to pin down than Clea Rose, let me tell you. Everybody follow everybody else in chat. We'll do shout-outs at the end, but there's a lot of wonderful streamers here, and Award.
But if you raise me a Danny Carey, or if you bet a Danny Carey or whatever, I'm gonna see you a Gavin Harrison.
Oh, who I got to see him with him doing the King Crimson thing with the three drummers. He was one of the drummers. Him, Pat Mastellato, and I don't remember who the third one was now. All three
He
of
was
those guys were great.
He was Porcupine Tree's drummer for a long
Right.
time.
Yeah. I never saw
And
Porcupine Tree. I saw Steve Wilson a couple times, but never Porcupine Tree.
What I love about Gavin is his ability to take odd time signatures and polyrhythms and just make them smooth and groove.
Sorry, Humane Colors asked a question. Which comedian is the best drummer? Dana Carvey, Fred Armisen, or Will Ferrell? I'm suspecting it's Fred Armisen.
Yeah, probably. That would be my guess.
Yeah. But like what we were saying about Roger Taylor, and this is something I want to say about Ringo too, because when I was in my teens, we used to make fun of Ringo because we were listening to drummers like, Mitch Mitchell and Keith Moon who had all these incredible chops. But I think as I've gotten older and matured, you realize that you don't want to hear a guy playing on any instrument. You don't want to hear a guy like just blasting technique at you for a whole song.
Right.
So a guy like Roger Taylor we were talking about, and we could probably name others, Ringo too, who have that subtle thing of knowing how to arrange their drum part to bring out the song. That's what I hear in Ringo and Taylor and some other guys, even guys who have a lot of chops, like Bonzo. Sometimes he would just play a straight up fucking backbeat for the entire verse of the song.
So one of the things I've noticed about my favorite drummers throughout the years, when I was young and learning drums, I wanted to listen to loud, fast drummers. And up into the 90s, I was all about, like the flashy polyrhythms, fast, weird drummers, Terry Bozzio type things. And then I just started drifting away from that and wanted more and more of just someone who lays back there and grooves. And along with that, I started not paying attention to whose name, I used to know all the band members' names and knew who they played with before, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you give me a name of a popular band now, I'll know the music, but that's like, I don't know any of the musicians' names. But where I'm going with this is the guy from Explosions in the Sky. He is not a flashy drummer, but he is a damn good drummer and just plays and fits the music. And, it's that kind of just groove and outside of the box thinking that he does as he approaches songs.
Well, a good
I want
point
to look
you
them
bring
up. I've never heard of them before.
Yeah, and I think
they're a post-rock band out of Texas, I believe.
And I think he goes by the guy from Explosions in the Sky. I think that's actually...
I think he did change his name.
Yeah, like, at the Starbucks, they'll call that out when they have his coffee ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Apartment 32Q? You ever heard of Apartment 32Q?
No.
Nope.
Colonel Bruce Hampton's drummer.
Oh, I saw them.
This guy.
They opened for the Dixie Dregs, and it was another one of those shows where I went more for the opening band than the headliner. I never knew that the name of that guy. I'm being like Splar.
Man, saw them play in Murfreesboro, my hometown, and they played the Main Street Club, and I was just watching him. He was just on fire the whole night. He was a lot like Mike Bourdain, Faith No More's drummer, and it's what I've heard about Mike Bourdain is that like he doesn't stop playing drums. Like when they play the set, he doesn't stop playing drums between songs. It's like he's just playing the whole time. I'm sure he stops every once in a while, but like he just keeps from song to song, just keeps them going.
I bet when he
and
sleeps,
that's how Apartment
he
32Q
stops.
was, but it was bebop, lightning fast jazz, like Colonel Bruce Hampton, right? And then when he was done with all of that, he just did a drum solo for like 5 minutes at the end of the set. Like everybody left and he's just still playing.
Nice.
So a thing Splar said about, coming up like grooving, but in, I don't remember the word you used, an idiosyncratic way, but Humane Color's also saying that drummer, beats that service the song but are also quirky. And a guy who I thought was great at that was Bill Bruford, where it'd be a drum beat, but he wouldn't he'd do things like the snare would be on the 2 and the E of 4, like he'd displace one of them, or he'd do all these things that would make the beats, they were his own, but they still held the groove together.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Any other guys you think of like that have that way of playing things and that kind of create their own beats that still have a groove to them?
Oh, well, yes, but like it will take me a long time to start thinking of things like that.
Okay, well, let me ask you guys this then.
Well, okay, Tim Alexander, Herb, for Primus,
right,
of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
Primus is becoming like in a way a bad Spinal Tap in real life thing with drummers, because I think they're up to 4 now that they've had, and it's like I think there was even a tour where they changed in the middle of it because whoever was for the first half wasn't available for the second, so they're like, oh, we'll bring this guy back.
Yeah, they're all really good friends, and Les has his own Bucket Brigade band. He's got a couple other side projects that he does, and he brings in, and it's basically like to the point of where he's got Primus, and they can kind of switch out the drummers a little bit. But then when he's got like these other bands, and they're like 6-8 piece bands. They're pretty big
the
bands.
Frog Brigade was like that, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And he's got
I like his work
Sean
with Sean Lennon.
Sean Lennon.
Is it Sean Lennon?
I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah,
I
that
haven't
is
heard it
really
yet, but I've heard
stuff.
it's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oysterhead was interesting, but there wasn't anything really. It was like an oyster. Just kind of.
Oh, the drummer thing's getting to you, Andrea? That's because she's a guitar player. She's like, all this
So
drum
here's
talk.
a name you guys might not know. Adam Woods. He is hands down one of my favorite drummers
He's that
of all time.
mobster actor, right?
No. You ever heard of a band called The Fix?
Oh yeah.
He's their drummer. Yeah, if you really analyze his drum parts, they're very masterful.
But weren't they one of those bands?
Nice.
Didn't they have one hit off of one album in the late '80s or something? Because I remember hearing a song of theirs on the radio.
That's what I recall.
Oh, that's the thing. Oh, those are my favorite bands. You find out later on that it's yeah, they had the one hit. Maybe they're one hit wonder, 2-hit wonder, but their later albums, they're so good. They're just so. The Fix is one of my favorite bands. I cannot. They are so underrated. It's not funny.
Huh. Well, let me ask you this question.
Seriously good.
Each of you name one drummer who was a big influence on you and what the influence was, what you got from that specific person. Let's start with Splar this time.
Well, one that first pops into my head is Lars Ulrich, and he had this nice habit of crash cymbals are usually bass drum and crash. He had this nice habit of snare drum and crash, and I found that to be just quite a unique take on it, and I use that from time to time myself.
And I'd say that's a good example of where, when we study things, we learn a rule, so to speak. You always play the bass drum with the crash to emphasize it. But it's these people who then decide, well, why is that a rule? What if I don't do that and do something else? And they're the ones that become the innovators. Um,
We joked about that one of my bands. We called it the unsupported cymbal crash.
I
Yeah,
loved that
yeah.
band, the Unsupported Cymbal Crash. I saw them on the side stage at one of the early Lollapaloozas. Yeah. So,
Wow, how cool!
Hayes, you name a drummer who influenced you and tell us how they did that.
You know, great. That's tough because for me, it's a toss up between Neil Peart and Phil Collins, and it really, I mean, Neil Peart was the one that I don't know that just made me want to play drums, but it was like because I'm left-handed and because Phil Collins is left-handed, he was sort of the
Oh, I
drummer
didn't
that
know that. Okay.
yeah. In fact, I'm thinking about when I pick my drums back up again this time around, just to try to play right-handed,
Yeah, because
just
didn't
to
Phil
force
play
myself.
right-handed?
Hmm?
Did Phil play left-handed or did he play right-handed?
Oh, he's a lefty. He's
Yeah.
a true lefty.
But he
He
also
set
plays
he
left.
set up left-handed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Hayes, do you set up left-handed or right-handed?
I am a true left-handed drummer.
Okay.
Let me tell that story real quick. There was a good friend of mine who had a nice drum set, and he was okay, but like he could not get the bass drum down. You know, like all things bass drum, he just couldn't quite figure that part out. And I was at his house one day playing on his drum set, which is set up right-handed, and his little brother's friend, who was about 11 years old, looked at me and said, "Oh, you're left-handed. Flip the drums around like Phil Collins does." And we all looked at him like, "What?" We looked at my friend. He's like, "Is that okay?" He said, "Yeah, go for it." So we swapped the hi-hat to the other side, and all of a sudden I could just play drums. And my friend hated me from that day forward. It caused a horrible rivalry.
So,
But yeah, true
quick
left-handed.
little aside here. Tim Kellaway saying he was playing drums because drummers were unreliable in his area. And Tim, that's because you live in Australia.
Hmm.
I suspect guitar players and bass players and plumbers and
So
vehicle mechanics are also unreliable in your area.
let's talk about Australian drummers, shall we?
Yeah,
Because
I think there's two and a half of those, right?
because check the no,
Yeah.
man, yeah, right. You got okay.
I'm getting this in while I can because I know give it another like year and it's just going to be America jokes all over because we're going to be at the bottom of the world by that point. I think.
Oh no, the world will crash long before we do. We're going to crash on top of them. Don't worry, we'll land. It'll be a nice
Yeah.
cushion. It'll be. Oh, sorry about that. Hope you enjoy the room here at the bottom. But no, seriously, these we got three bands, man, with three notable drummers whose names I can't think of right now. Men at Work, In Excess, and Midnight Oil.
I didn't know In Excess was Australian. I knew about the other two.
Neither did I.
Yeah, and those three drummers are all utterly fantastic. Probably the best one being Midnight Oil's drummer. He was probably the most technically proficient. And I remember reading in a Modern Drummer one time, I think it was I think it might have been an NXS show. And they were playing and they had the steel drum and the drummer from Midnight Oil popped out of it as a surprise. Like the NXS drummer didn't know that he was going to do that.
Oh, Tim Kelway's dad fixed In Excess's guitars.
Awesome.
Huh. They're the ones that I heard the most from. Midnight Oil, I remember hearing that one song from, and Men at Work, I heard, I think, two songs from on the radio. But I don't think I've heard any of the
What?
tracks from any of those.
Dude. So like, yeah, those two albums by Midnight Oil are classics. So good. They got so many great songs that, like you probably had no, like, oh, they're so good.
Yeah, all the
They're on the
deep cuts
radio.
on those Midnight Oils are better than the hit singles to
Oh, and
me.
Midnight Oil is such an amazing, they've got such a catalog of songs. And NXS goes way back too. They go back to
Yeah.
80, 81. It's the Real Thing. That's like one of my favorite NXS songs.
I've heard
And the
that one.
drums on that, man, like if you really analyze the drums on Real Thing, I think that's the name of it. They're it's in it gets us into U2 territory because I really think that U2 and Larry White was influenced by those cats somehow. It's like there's a lot of similarities in REM for that matter.
Yep.
Drummer's doing a lot of 16th notes on the hi-hat.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah. Larry
16th
Larry
notes look
White
like.
is another one of those. Larry White's another one of those drummers that has a non-standard thinking outside of the box approach to how he plays.
Mm-hmm.
Now he
Just good
does a lot
solid
of
drumming.
basic stuff, but he does a lot of just out there. I would never have thought that for that song kind of beat.
Now, that's a thing that attracts me to drummers. Eli, we were talking about this the other day because I said, you got to hear the drums on this track. And I played him She's Not There from the Zombies.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
I don't even know who the drummer with the Zombies was, or if it wasn't even the same drummer on all of their tracks, because it might have been a studio guy for all I know. But
It was Hal Blaine.
No, yeah, that one might have been Hal Blaine actually. That is a great chance, but
it's just the way he's got this beat, like this linear type thing that he does for the verses that totally sells it. But then when it goes to the chorus, he goes to the ride cymbal and plays a straight beat, or to the pre-chorus, and then on the chorus, he's playing quarter notes on the snare and accenting on the bass drum. And the way that the way that the drums are arranged in that song to me is essential to the way that song sounds. But Eli joked when I played for him. He goes, "That's all what you're talking about is this kind of drumming. This is the kind of drumming you like."
so who is David Palmer?
Oh,
I'm
he's
gonna
that Italian
derail
mobster
everything.
actor, right?
That's another mobster actor. Yeah, David Palmer is a session drummer, I think, from England. Now there's a band called The.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
You've heard of them.
yeah.
And an album called Mind Bomb. The drumming on like the first two of the whole album really, but the first two or three tracks is just some of the most intricate, pristine, like and perfectly recorded audiophile level. Just I mean, makes me want to throw up and quit playing drums forever. It's so good. It's so perfect. And it's that kind of it's that human perfection that AI and robotic kind of things I don't think will ever touch the level of. I mean, we could, you just basically have to turn that robot into the same person that David Palmer was. That's all, you know? But anyways, I bring that up just because, you know, all these great British drummers as well. Like there's just so many of them.
Yep.
The Smiths, the drummer from the Smiths, for example.
Who I think his full name is the drummer from the Smiths.
It is. It's Smithy Smith, Smith face.
So another question.
You guess what his father was?
A Smith, an
He's
Iron
a Smith.
Yeah. So since you both are drummers, in terms of developing that kind of groove, but still, you know, your own idiosyncratic style, are there things that you have done or believe has to be done to get to that point, to be like these people we're talking about?
Yes. Study what they do and do it the same way they do it in a sense.
Ah,
You
so
know,
again, emulating to
yeah.
find your own voice.
You know, you're not going to have a fun time playing along with Rush on a four-piece kit.
Right.
You can do it, but it's not the same thing.
Hmm.
And whereas if you did play Neil Peart's kit, you could play kind of any other form of music. You would just restrict yourself and not play those other drums.
Yep. And I played along to Rush music plenty of times on a four-piece.
Yeah.
and you definitely learn how to make the most out of those four pieces.
Yes, absolutely. I did it on a five-piece. I played YYZ on a five-piece and
Yep.
managed to do this. You know, it was okay.
Yeah, Neil's got 8 toms, but you know what? It sounds just as good if you nail it on 2 toms.
So there was, if you don't mind, Jimmy, there was something that somebody showed me a long time ago, and on a four-piece. And when you do a fill, and I love to talk about fills.
Well, like Phil
the function
Collins,
of
for
fills.
instance.
So when you do like a fill on a four-piece, you got 8 notes that you want to fill up. So you got 2 on the snare, 2 on this rack time up here, and you got 2 more, but still got 2 more to fill up. What you do is two on the snare, then you do two on the front rack tom, and then two more on that same rack tom. So that's four notes total, right? But you go one, two, three, four. So you one, two, bam, 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 bam. And it gives the illusion that you have three toms now.
Yep.
The accent on that same tom can give you the illusion that you move to a lower tom. If you're not paying attention, not looking, hey, here's a good one. Like if you say ba, 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 but you're going fa, 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 you'll actually hear me say fa. Your brain will make that up. If I record myself saying ba with the B, the audio, and I overlay that with a video of me saying fa with an F, you'll hear like the audio. If you hear the audio by itself, you'll hear ba. But if you see me say it, you'll hear fa.
Huh.
Yeah, it's true. It works. It's like, oh, it's like a blind spot.
See, a trick I like to do along those lines is play the accents on the toms. Start out with the lower one. So let's just say I'm doing all 16th notes on this fill, and the accents are on the 1, 2, 3, and 4. Start out with the low, then the 2 on the top, and then the 4th on the low, and it gives it that same kind of feel of, it seems like more drums because you got that snare in there, and hitting the 2 and starting out on the low, it gives it that illusion of a lot of different sounds.
So is this something? Okay. So first of all, this is a thing that I've always found fascinating about drummers, because when I was in high school, there was a drummer I used to jam with all the time, but he would change his kit like literally every time. Like, oh, now I've got, 4 cymbals but 2 toms. Oh, now I'm going to have 4 toms but only have 2 cymbals, and like, I think that's neat that your instrument, like if you have a guitar, it's got 6 strings. They all come like that. You can't say, I want to get a 5.5 string guitar. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, but you have alternate tunings.
Right, but most guitar players, we just start out playing standard tuning, and some of us never learn an alternate tuning. So it's kind of like with drums, it's really easy to like change your instrument. But do you find that that's something that has taught you to innovate, doing like, for instance, learning rush tunes when you don't have the same equipment as the guy who played them?
Oh yeah, 100%. I change my kit around, mostly cymbal placement, but I do change tom placements as well, depending on what song I'm playing or maybe what genre. Because sometimes you want that floor tom over on the left, and just it fits that song because you're doing a lot of fast hi-hat stuff. You want to be able to hit that floor tom off to the left instead of reaching all the way over across. And sometimes I'll change the ride cymbal to be in the middle because I'm doing double kick, and it just helps me balance.
Haze, what have you got to say about that?
Yeah, I for the longest time just played what I had, and whatever I had is what I had. One of my favorite drum kits was a hybrid between my kit and my bass drum player and my bass player's drum kit. At one point, actually at 2 points, I incorporated electronic drums in with my acoustic drums and
Nice.
triggers and samples, but in a way where like the core was was all acoustic, so I could play. I had a acoustic 4-piece at all times, so that if anything happened with electronics, I still had something to back up on. I find that when it comes to all that stuff, the most important thing to be placed for me is the bass drum. Everything else can kind of make do, but the bass drum, if I have like a solid bass drum, because that's one of the most important notes to place exactly where it needs to be placed, is the bass drum. The snare is the next one, but the bass player is definitely not going to want to play with you if he can't groove with your bass drum, and it's just not going to feel good. So, but the thing is, though, is that what I'm kind of learning now after being influenced by my drum mentor Michael Brasic from Los Angeles is, show up to the gig with just a 4-piece and a couple cymbals, because you're not getting paid for all those extra drums. And what he does is he brings attitude to the gig. Like when he plays drums, he's back there like just rocking out. But he's like, I'm not going to bring more than a 4-piece because I can set this up in 5 minutes. I can tear it down in 5 minutes. I'm not getting paid for all that other crap.
Yep.
Well, you talked about that when you visited Haze, and I think I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned you the story of I was doing this straight ahead jazz gig with this guy Percy Bryce, who played with Monk and Charlie Parker and some of these guys. This was like amazing to play with this guy, and he played fucking incredible. And when we were done with the first set, and he was getting up, we were getting up to take a break, was when I noticed he had a ride cymbal and a snare drum. He didn't have a bass drum, didn't even have a fucking hi-hat. That he played the whole gig just on those two things. And of course, there's Leon Parker, who, if you haven't heard him, really interesting drummer. But apparently, he would do gigs and he'd be like, you know what? I'm not going to bring the snare drum today. You know what? I'm going to bring the bass drum and the hi-hat and a ride cymbal, or the snare drum and the floor tom and a rack. Like, he would just take like different parts of the drums to see what he could do with them. Which was probably a really neat way of discovering what you could do. Now, Tim had a question that how come drummers aren't using bass drum triggers, because then they wouldn't have to have the bass drum there and it would be so much more ergonomic. You could have the toms in a nice place to play them rather than having to reach up here. Is there a reason for that? Is it because it doesn't look rock and roll if you don't have a big bass drum in front of you?
Well, I played electric drums for a while, at live shows, and it just doesn't feel right. So having
Hang on.
replacing
He
that
says
kick
not
with
triggers,
a trigger.
remote pedals.
Oh, remote pedals.
I thought he
Terry
meant the
Bozio does.
Yeah, Terry Bozzio does, and Alex Van Halen does as well.
Mainly remote hi-hats are the main thing.
Yep. So I've never had a problem with the kick drum being in the way and not being able to put my toms where I want. But I play a teeny tiny kit. I have a 20-inch kick, and my largest rack tom is a 12. So I've got a 10 and 12. And so I've never had a problem with placing it. Now, when you start getting into, 14-inch power toms and a 24-inch kick, then yeah, you're going to get some weird ergonomics going on. But and I always play offset too. So most people, when they set up a 5-piece, they've got the two toms over the kick. I take two toms directly in front of me, so the right rack tom is on the left side of the kick, and the other tom is just there in front. So it's basically a triangle of snare, two toms, and the kick and hi-hat are basically at an angle. So it's not a standard 5-piece setup, but it's a lot more ergonomic that way, and I never have a problem with ergonomics on the toms because of where the kick's at.
Yeah, I don't mount my toms off the kick. I can if I want to, but I mount them from cymbal stands.
Yeah, and that's how mine are as well, because I've got this the kick that I have is a refurbished kick from I don't know, in 70s or something that didn't have tom mounts on it. So I've always either used a snare stand for that tom or something off of the cymbal stand. But so I do play a double kick pedal. So it's basically that left kick is, a remote pedal for lack of better description. And it doesn't feel the same as the regular pedal on the kick. Now, that could be because it's just my left foot and it's, being right-footed, that doesn't feel the same. But I don't think I've ever tried to do that pedal with the right foot. Maybe I'll give that a shot and see if if it's actually useful that way. But theoretically, there should be no problem with it.
Yeah, but wouldn't the advantage be, because I think if what he's saying, if I'm understanding what he's saying, when he's saying remote pedals, it's meaning that you don't have to go all the way to the venue. You can just stay in your living room and trigger the kick drum and the hi-hat.
Now, that would be awesome, because moving drums into a venue, the kick drum is the hardest one to deal with.
Yep.
Well, no, the
hardware bag is the thing.
The hardware bag.
The hardware bag is the worst. Yes.
Walt was talking about that the other day. That like yeah, when the band is helping the drummer load in, nobody will take the hardware bag. That's on the drummer to move. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I always had to have somebody to help me because don't want to buy stuff. I want to talk about Fulcrum for a second, if we may.
Oh, I saw them in the mid '90s. I think it was on the side stage at Lollapalooza.
That was lucky you. So where do you hold your Fulcrum at these days, Solar?
Um, I don't know. I didn't know we were going to have, real technical stuff. Let me grab a stick.
While you're talking, like I used to, how I was taught, of course. I mean, what do you do? But I used to always hold it here with the pointer finger and the thumb. So this is what I used to do.
So like this?
Yeah, that's what I used to do. And then I heard that people at PIT, they hold it here with this finger instead, the middle finger.
Oh, but I usually need that for some other things.
Right? Exactly, right? But this was actually like I learned that it took me a while to get used to it, but once I started, like at first it was cool because it made me play weaker so I could actually play softer. So that was kind of a nice side effect. But then as I grew strength in that finger, it adds, louder and louder. But I recently watched that University of Texas in Dallas, Texas from 1985 clinic with Tony Williams. He's playing his yellow drum set, and he comes out on stage and he tells everybody he holds the stick back here.
Tony Williams.
He's back.
Wow.
These two fingers.
Wow.
And he says this way you have control. He says he doesn't rely on bounce anymore. And I've heard people talk about when Tony Williams when he made that statement saying he doesn't rely on bounce. He controls his own doubles and everything.
Huh.
And so that's what I'm going to try. I'm going to try that next.
That Simon Phillips at a clinic said that I don't know what he did with that, but that I think it was with these fingers, but he said he would use the other fingers because he would push the stick with them, and that's how he would get speed.
Yeah, that's what I do is hold it like that, and then the middle finger and sometimes ring finger will do the fast movement.
Now there's another way where you can actually, and I'm very bad at this. One of the teachers that I had in LA told me about this. It's a way you literally rock them back and forth like this.
Yeah.
And what it is it's like super power 16ths. Like, I mean, you're hitting as hard as you can, but you're getting the full swing, right? And it's hard to do because it's hard to control. It's when you get on the drum and you're actually, because you're hitting as hard as you can, and all of that bounce and swing, it's really hard to control. It takes a lot of.
Well, and if you really wanted to get power, wouldn't it be better if you held the stick with both hands?
That would be so funny to see a drummer doing that. I can't believe seriously, I can't believe nobody's done that. Just back
with those big giant novelty sticks that you can buy.
And playing a backbeat, but with just one stick with both hands.
Only bringing a snare. But yeah, that's what's interesting is that I used to get a lot of blisters, especially when I was playing Rush and other stuff. And I would learn like when you tend to get blisters, that's bad technique.
Yeah.
But
I got blisters all the time when I was first learning. When I first sat down at a drum kit, moving from snare drum to drum kit, I was blisters all over. And I was like, well, that's obviously because I'm not used to playing like this. But, you are correct. It is technique.
I was in a surf rock band where the drummer would wear a glove on his right hand. And he told me it was because the rim shots, he was always cutting this part of his finger up, I think it was. So he dealt with it not by learning good technique, but by just wearing, it looked like an Italian racing glove,
Yeah.
And he would just wear one on his right hand.
Well, I know a lot of drummers wear gloves because they sweat. And if you sweat, then you tend to, grip the stick too hard to keep hold of it.
Ah.
And so they just use a glove for that grip so they can keep a lighter touch and still sweat.
I heard that
I had a
Ginger
rare
used to-
privilege.
I was just going to say I heard that.
Rare,
That's
rare
the lag.
privilege of seeing. Sorry,
You
I had a
go
rare
ahead.
privilege of seeing David Grohl. David Grohl playing for Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh, I wish I would have been
and
at that show.
he wore gloves for that tour.
Huh.
And I think he wore gloves because he had not been playing drums very much before that tour, and the physical demands of that, like that you play along, try playing along with songs for the deaf.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's
Yep.
really hard. That's something that's David Grohl's best drumming right there.
I heard that Ginger they would gaffer tape the sticks to his hands before some of those Cream shows, and this led to the rumor that he was strung out on heroin and would keep dropping the sticks, so that's how they dealt with it. But I heard that no, it was the same thing you're talking about, that he's sweating and he's playing so hard that
Yeah.
this was a way of making him not have to grip the sticks so tightly. And
See, I've
understand
heard,
technique.
That
I
sounds
think it
more
was
like
Max Weinberg had that story about him having to tape sticks to his hands as well.
That's because he was
Okay.
very influenced by Ginger.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that's funny because I recently watched a documentary on Bruce Springsteen's Darkness at the Edge of Town, and man, he really put Max through the ringer during the recording of that album. And Max was into it though. He was like he was up for the challenge. But that's funny you say that because what it was is that when Max would be recording the drums, everybody would just be waiting for Bruce to yell out stick, 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 and what that meant was what it was. I don't right or wrong, whatever. Bruce had this vision. He didn't want to hear the stick. He wanted to hear the drum.
Ah,
So anytime he would hear any kind of any clickiness whatsoever, he'd call out stick and they do the take again. That's tough.
yeah, yeah.
But that was yeah, that now this is going to sound wrong, but not for that. But that documentary made me gain a lot of respect for Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff about him, and it seems like he could come off as being a real jerk, but it sounds like he just knew his stuff and knew he wanted, what he wanted it to sound like, and what his musicians were capable of doing, and how much he could push them, and within the realms of what they could handle.
Because there's this whole thing of laying behind the beat, playing ahead of the beat, you know. And when you listen to like Max back in those days, he was just kind of a straight ahead drummer, very solid, very tight, but just kind of a straight ahead drummer. I saw him play at a Conan O'Brien show in New York City, the taping of a Conan O'Brien show. So I got to see one of those shows, but I was like really cool because like Max was right over there playing drums, and I was just watching his technique. I mean, he was playing bebop jazz. He was so on top of the beat. I was just in awe of his prowess. And then the coolest thing happened. He dropped a stick, and you never if you didn't see him, you never would have heard it. Like in an instant, he had another stick. He almost like he just threw it away, like it was broken or something, and he
Yeah.
was swapping out sticks or something. And just no breaking continuity whatsoever. Just a perfect drummer.
Yeah, that's a good skill to have as a drummer, being able to break a stick and pick up another one and not lose stride at all. I still, to this day, I keep two pair in the bass drum lugs, and I have a stick holder on my hi-hat, and more often than not, a stick bag on the floor tom. So
You got it covered.
there's always a stick within reach, and I don't even tour or do shows anymore. This is just for me recording and whatnot. It's just habits from when playing shows. If you break a stick, you want to have something easily grabbable from wherever your hands may be.
He'll keep one up each of his sleeves, and then if he really needs one, he'll get one from behind your ear. So
Oh,
now,
that would be so funny.
speaking of which, though, Splar, you write and record your own music. His mom doesn't help him with any of it, so he says. What is your approach when you're putting drums down for your own music? Do you already know what the drums are supposed to be when you conceive of the tune? Do you have to put the other tracks down and then think of how the drum part's going to go to it? What's your process, so to speak, when you're creating drum parts for your own music?
So it's always different, but in general, I don't have any idea what the drum parts are going to be. I just have the music and song down, and I will take those tracks and just kind of jam to the music, and then kind of feel what works there. Uh, Now, sometimes as I'm doing that, I'll realize, well, I'd like to play this, but it doesn't fit what's already recorded. So then I'll have to go back and re-record the guitar track or bass line or something like that.
Oh.
But more often than not, I have no idea what I'm going to be playing on the drums. But there are some times where I have this drum beat that I think would be awesome with straight ahead rock type guitar. And I just focus on that drum beat and then write a guitar part for it. Where I think I have two, maybe one, two songs that I've done that approach, but more often than not, it's, start out with a guitar riff that I like, and then I'll come up with the drums once the song's basically written.
Okay. And by the way, if you want to hear what
Yes.
this stuff is, you can. He's not just Solar Idolator on Twitch. You can also look up Solar Idolator on Bandcamp, Spotify, Deezer. Please don't use Amazon because Jeff Bezos is a fucking douche. And now, Haze, the recordings I've heard of you have been more electronica stuff. How does being a drummer influence your electronic music creation? By the way, Haze insists that he doesn't use AI for any of that stuff. Splar's mom
Just the album
actually helps him
artwork.
with it.
I will confess I used AI for the album artwork, but it's just temporary.
Which is
until I
fair.
can find, yeah,
You know, a quick thing.
Sure.
I've done that, but mostly because I know some great artists, and I'm certain they probably would share their art with me for free, and some of them have. But I feel like, how many times am I going to use your stuff with you not getting paid? I feel bad asking them, like, let me put you. So I've used AI just because I don't feel comfortable continuing to use friends' work for free. But anyway, go ahead and answer my brilliant question, please.
I will. But let me first state that I really have no animosity towards anybody that uses AI to create music for commercials kind of stuff because I don't do that anyways. You know, see what I'm saying? It's kind of like it's a tough call here what we're talking about here because it's like it's all commercial based type kind of stuff. It's not like we're trying to, do fine art in a sense.
Huh. And I
If,
would
if,
say
if I
then,
was trying to do fine art, I would want to do a project and get an artist, you know what I'm saying? And be like, we're going to have a, real paint, I'm going to commission this kind of thing, right? But this is just, these are just demos, right? We're just doing demos.
I would want
So,
to add to that,
but
though, that I have
go,
animosity for everyone.
fair enough.
Okay, now
Equal
continue, Hayes.
animosity, opportunity. So yeah, it's okay. So here's the funny thing is that in the music that I'm doing, I've learned to embrace just the four on the floor disco. I mean, a lot of techno is a direct extension from disco. I used to hate disco as a kid, and now here I am making modern disco. The irony. If somebody had only told me what life would have taken me, I might not be here today doing this. But hey, you know what? I guess I love disco now. ABBA was my favorite band when I was a kid.
ABBA was great songwriters, though. I mean,
Yeah.
even though
So,
the style sounds very disco, if you just take those songs and look at how they're structured and written, they were fucking great songwriters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not. What I like to do, what I like to do is basically make melodic rhythms. So what I'm kind of doing is like the drums themselves are very simple, very, very basic. But then I try to have like these keyboard parts act as an ostinato, if you will, which might be like a ride cymbal pattern. And something I was kind of thinking about and having all these rhythms kind of show up through a harmonic part or a melodic part. This is like a few notes in some scale that I really don't know what it is in the first place. But it's really fun. And then if I want to, I can always craft the beat around whatever music that I'm generating up. And like, wherever the syncopation points are, I can choose to emphasize those points as a downbeat or an upbeat. And I don't have to stay in 4/4. So a lot of this stuff, it's really cool. You can use a lot of odd time signatures, and you can choose to have the drums be the 4/4 on top of that polyrhythm, or you can reverse it the other way around. It's usually better when the drums are keeping just the solid 4/4, and then you hear the repeated 5 or 7 pattern over on top. But then you can also do kind of cool things where you just have the bass drums keeping 4 on the floor, and some other drum parts are playing along in 5/4 with that part or 7/4. The sky's the limit, really. And what ends up usually happening is I just try to let the song write itself when I'm doing this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But if I'm playing in a band, it's a whole different thing. I'm working with the bass player. A lot of times we're riffing. I'm listening to what the overall structure is, and I'm usually just keeping a straight ahead beat at first until I can find if there's some kind of syncopation. And then it's like a matter of like, okay, where are the stop and start points? Where can we, like, and I think this can maybe tie into talking about drum fills themselves
Like
and the
Phil
importance of
Collins.
drum fills and their function and why they're even there. Because drummers, as a drummer, like, we think it's like, hey, it's my time to shine. Look at me time. You know what I mean? And every time they go around, it's like you get to this point to where like I want to sort of like add punctuation to the end of these sentences by doing a fill every time, not realizing, no, you don't need to do that. You just keep the beat right there. And you start to realize that where the fill needs to be a lot of times is like, okay, well, the guitar player has to switch up right here. So I can fill in the sections and allow the guitar player to swap out effects, get ready for the solo. And what I've learned is that with techno music, because it gets so ambiguous, sometimes when I listen to techno music, I hear the bass and the snare on the and beats, one and two and three and I have to work very hard to like, okay, whoa, I'm not hearing the beat right. Because as a drummer, the syncopation, right? You learn to like all the syncopation that you're actually saying, no, that's a beat right there. It's a syncopated beat, but it's not. That's not what's meant to be. It's meant to be 1, 2, 3, 4. But I'm on and I'll have to like mute the volume and tap my head and then try to come back to it or just do whatever I can to really hit the snare drum. But one drum fill would fix all of that. One little digga 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 boom, and now you're back on the beat again. So it's like every 64 bars or so, every 128, it's good to have a drum fill to help establish that beat. Unless there's a lot of actual songwriting going on, right? I'm talking about techno music right now, which is fun stuff, but it's generally kind of ambiguous. In a lot of real techno music, there is no backbeat. It's just the downbeat.
Hmm.
And I'll
You know,
shut up now. Thank you.
something you said about, putting your fills where you realize, oh, the guitar player needs to switch a pedal there or something. It reminds me of a thing that, um, it was a thing about Idris Muhammad, the jazz drummer, and he was playing in a New Orleans type brass band, and Bob Stewart was playing tuba. And Bob Stewart was saying, he says, man, I realized I'm playing the best I ever played, man. This is amazing. Like he's doing it. And then he realized that, when you're playing the bass line on a tuba, it's not like playing a bass. You have to breathe. Idris was watching Bob Stewart, and whenever Stewart would go to breathe, he would hit a crash cymbal so that you wouldn't hear the space in the bass line where he was breathing, which made his bass line sound more continuous. And Stewart said he didn't realize at first why he felt he sounded so good. It wasn't because of what he was doing. It was because Muhammad was playing in such a way to make his bass line sound more contiguous.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's something, how many drummers would have thought I should check out the tuba player and help them out? Um, and so what you're saying too, because like I think you're right, a lot of drummers are like, it's been 3 measures, I've got to play a fill now, rather than thinking, what's going on in the band, and is a fill what I should play right now?
That's one thing that I learned doing all of the instruments. I approach fills completely differently. Uh,
And one thing I want to point out, the
because
reason Splar does all of the instruments is because nobody wants to get together with him.
Yeah, I'm kind of a jerk. People don't want to hang out with me.
Anyway, please go on.
But I've noticed that, and I'm probably like a lot of guitar players, I don't count very well when I'm playing guitar. I can count like crazy when I'm playing drums, But when I'm playing guitar, I don't have the brain capacity to play what I'm playing and count. Um, so having those fills in there lets me know, if I do a short fill, that's halfway through the phrase. If I do a big fill, that's the end of the phrase. The chorus is getting ready to kick in. And,
Interesting.
Ah,
and so I kind of approach fills in that perspective. So I kind of have my own language that I use to cue myself without actually having to cue myself.
the thing that I think is great about that is that it serves as a cue for you when you're overdubbing other parts. But I would expect that also adds to the music because the short fill, the listener is hearing that, oh, there was a short fill and now even if they're not consciously aware of it, then there's a long fill which probably creates the sense that there's a bigger change going to happen here.
Yep.
So it's not just I have to cue myself, it's also serving the music, I would suspect. I've never
And
listened to his music, so I have no idea.
and I would have to think that on some level, I do that same kind of thing, like the story that you were just saying, where fill the space, because some chords I just can't switch between because I'm not good, and so having something to fill that space as I go down to the C or whatever,
Doing the thing where you have to move each finger to the next.
yeah, and then I have to get my other hand over there to kind of place the fingers where they need to be. And,
Well, that's all the drum fill is. We go from this drum to this drum to get to this drum to get to the right cymbal.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There
And
is something.
I am trying to get to the point in my bass playing where I actually do fills on the bass. I can't do fills on the guitar yet, but I'm getting to the point where I can on the bass.
Okay, yeah, because that's the fun part, right? Is when you realize as a drummer, well, the bass player can do this too.
Yep.
Now I will say this: here's a good bass player, and any bass players out there, listen to your drummer. Trust me, if they do a fill, land when they land. Just land when they land, and don't worry about it. Worry about it in practice, but when you're playing live on stage, land when they land. Make it sound good. Always
Yep.
make it sound good.
Well, and that was a thing that Pert had with Geddy Lee is that they would kind of do the fills together very often, so that it wasn't just a drum fill; it was the bass and drums creating a fill within the music.
Yeah.
Let me be very specific what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about specifically is that as a drummer, when I do a fill, chances are I'm going to rush and I'm going to end too soon. And I need that bass player to correct me.
Yep.
And when the bass player corrects the drummer, the rest of the band will fall in line and the audience will never notice.
As a bass player, I find I often have to correct the drummer, music, grammar, math,
Manners,
Yes, right.
Manners. Yeah.
right? Swallowing, chewing your food. Absolutely, man. It's important for us to drool equally on both sides. Essential. It's important for us to knock evenly for our careers as pizza delivery boys.
Yep.
And no, it's not a drummer. So, talking about fills and phrasing though, when I'm doing this techno music over here, if you can imagine, generally speaking, I just sort of have like an infinite thing that's repeating itself, like one measure over and over and over and over until I select different measures. So it's up to me to count, hey, are we on the 32nd bar? Has 64 bars gone by? If I want things to be even, right? Like, like 4 times 4 is 16, times 2 is 32, like, 32 bar kind of thing. It's up to me. But I can also set up one of these machines to do an autofill like every 32 bars as well. So that way I don't have to pay attention and count and I can just listen for that fill to kind of come in and know, okay, I can change now. And sometimes I just don't care. Sometimes I just change whenever I want to.
Yep.
It'll be a 5 measure phrase, whatever, and just go. And so it's a matter of like, like when I'm just, just trying to like be free and just kind of discover things. And I don't really hold myself beholden to any grid structure or anything like that. But when I go to do the final take, it's like, yeah, I try to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly. You know, if I make a couple of mistakes, I'll roll with it. I won't bother. I won't care.
And
But
it's
I'll
that
really,
type of mentality that I have the same kind of thing where I don't care how many times it went through. That kind of gets me into it, finding out that a piece should be in 5/4 or something along those lines, that it would just fit differently that way. Um, and
Mhm.
I've got a song that has a 5-bar phrase, and it sounds completely wacky, but it works. Well, to me, it works. I mean, I think it works.
That's cool then. Yeah, I love odd phrasing.
Yeah.
That and get this brings it back to Ringo because to me that was one of the Beatles' big innovations. Is before them pop music was all 8-bar phrases and 16 and 32 bar forms. They started bringing in these odd bar phrases, and so Ringo as a drummer had to deal with I can't just do a fill every fourth bar because the songs aren't built like that.
It's
And
kind
then
of like the
after
birth of
that,
progressive.
Yeah.
after them, it became kind of ubiquitous that even people nowadays who haven't heard the Beatles are doing odd bar phrasing because they've been influenced by people who have been influenced by people who have listened to the Beatles.
I've got a bike. You can ride it if you like. It's got bells and whistles, lots of things to make it look good. Give it to you if I could, but I borrowed it.
Yeah, yeah. There's a good example. And I'd heard the theory put forward, which I think is definitely true of Sid Barrett, but I've heard it of the Beatles that people have theorized that the reason they had the odd bar phrasing is they were one of the first, some of the first songwriters who would sometimes start with a lyrical idea.
Yeah.
So if you've got 3 bars of lyrics, you're going to have a 3-bar phrase. They didn't like sit down and say we're going to do crazy phrasing. It was just that these are the lyrics. We're putting chords to those lyrics, and now we've got 4 bars or 7 bars or whatever it was.
Rush was very big on that one. And everybody doesn't know, I know y'all probably do, but like Neil would write the lyrics. He would just write a bunch of lyrics, and then Getty and Alex would get together and just write the music. And then so they would, have lots of opportunities because I nobody talks about this, right? You've seen the documentary, right? And talk about like how Rush they stuck it to the man. 2112, man. We're going to do it our way or the highway. We do our songs. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then they got signed to Atlantic. They don't, and the documentary doesn't talk about that part. As soon as they signed to Atlantic, they did what the studios told them to do. They started writing,
Well,
formatted songs, but they got really creative. Like they weren't doing as many, like they weren't doing like the progressive epics or anything, but they were doing very thoughtful. Almost all their songs have odd phrasing in them somewhere. They've got some weird little, you
yeah.
know.
Entre Nous is like that. It's
Mm.
very Beatlesque in that I think the phrase is 5 bars long. It's got all those inversions going on, those hybrid chords that the Beatles were also very big on. Yeah, that was kind
And
of
that's
like.
a that's great song.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to your other point, though, I always feel it's a shame when people talk about that 2112 story because if you listen to the second side of that album, they did really try to write some radio hits, and
Yeah.
some of them were
Yeah.
really fucking awful.
Tears.
Yeah, or
There is.
the Twilight Zone. I think is such a
Oh
piece
yeah.
of trash. The guitar
It's
solo
pretty.
at the end is cool, but like the actual song itself is
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. It will grow on you the more you listen to it, and it's kind of like it's cheesy. But there is a band, and I'm going to post it in your Discord. There was sometime around 2000, somebody did a tribute to Rush. I don't. It was called Red Star, and it's like a whole bunch of like kind of alternative bands doing Rush songs. It was the weirdest. And this one band actually had the balls to do Tears, and it kicks ass.
Nice.
It is so good. I'll post it and I'll let y'all see
I
see what
think
you
that
think of it.
Getty wrote those lyrics for that song too, if I
I think
remember
so.
correctly.
Yeah, I think he did write those.
So that
Yeah.
wasn't even a Neil Peart lyric. Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's a great song. It's just like, what is this doing here? It's out of place.
Yeah.
Whereas Twilight Zone is not a good song. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what else is on this. Something for Nothing is on the second side, which is a good song.
That's a great song.
But I can't remember what else is on the second side. I just remember as a kid, like, skipping most of those and just listening to Something for Nothing, maybe, and then the 2112 suite. Yeah, they always act like they were in defiance of the label, but I think that the actual story is they did try to write some radio hits. And fortunately for them, the first side caught on, and then they were allowed to do what they wanted.
Lessons.
Yep.
Lessons is also on.
Yes,
Lessons.
that's right.
Yeah, I just had to Google it myself.
And another one that's kind of cheesy was Passage to Bangkok. Musically, not so bad, but those were weak lyrics, I thought.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was just getting started. Yeah, you're right.
And that's also a thing too, because even though that was their fourth album, I think that was only within 2 years. Like bands were putting out like an album every 6 months back then. So
Yeah, and don't forget John Rutsey was the first drummer, so Neil came in late to the game in a way.
Yep. I still find it funny that a lot of Rush fans don't consider that first album to be a Rush album because of that.
I absolutely do.
But there's some really solid songs on that first album.
Solid drumming too. I think John Rutsey was a fine drummer.
Yeah. There was nothing wrong with his playing at all.
Yeah.
And they still played those songs. In fact, the second to last time I saw them, they did Working Man in the encore. They were still playing those songs.
Hey baby.
Oh, In the Mood.
In the Mood.
Yeah.
They always play that song.
Well, yeah, Working Man is one of their biggest, most popular songs.
Oh yeah. That put them on the map for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't do it the first time I saw them though. In fact, I think that was the only time they did it. Was on the Time Machine tour that I saw them, and they did that. In fact, they started it out as a reggae, which was funny.
So the Time Machine tour, is that the one where they actually asked fans what they wanted to hear and took a poll or whatever and played a lot of the songs that they don't usually play live? I know one of the tours they did that.
It wasn't that one.
Maybe.
The Time Machine one was when they played the whole Moving Pictures album.
Oh, okay.
That's the tour I missed. I would have liked to have seen that one. But two of my favorite Rush songs, "Losing It."
Ah.
I love that song, and "Freeze."
Freeze is a great song.
Mm-hmm.
It starts out, it almost sounds like it could be on an early Yes album.
Yeah, and when it gets to like that rocking section, it's just balls to the wall. It's like that is a fun one to play along
A
with.
number of the songs on that album, the one Earthshine, which has that section in
I
11.
love that song.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was we were talking about that earlier. I do think that absolutely, like every album after Moving Pictures was Rush's worst album until Vapor Trails. But no, they got better after Roll the Bones. I think everybody agrees that Counterparts was a vast improvement. And still though, Test for Echo is still highly contended, but I think I like Test for Echo a lot more than Counterparts.
Yeah.
Now,
Power Windows was my first intro to Rush.
Oh, I'm
I
so
love
sorry.
Power Windows.
And I like that album. In hindsight, I definitely see how that's not one of their strongest ones, but I still have a special place for it in my heart because it was the first one that I listened to.
My intro, whatever initiation album was Hold Your Fire.
Okay.
But like I went back. It's not like this is the only, and I'm only going to listen to this and going for it. No, I went backwards immediately, back down the list.
Yeah.
And funny story. I remember when Power Windows came out, like everybody in the marching band, of course, when Grace Under Pressure came out, like everybody like was talking, they went to go see Rush. Like all the cool kids went to the concert. The next day they came back with the bandanas and the T-shirts, and so
Reeking
it was
of
like,
pop.
they were a somewhat popular band, like even back then. Like people talk about like, oh, we hate Rush, but they sure did go to see them live. You know what I mean? They were there for the shows. And then when Power Windows came around, I don't think they came to Nashville for that tour. but I remember two of the drummers in marching band. When we were one of the trips that we took to either for a contest or I'm pretty sure it was to go play a contest. So we hop on the bus on a Saturday and drive for 4 hours to some other location and play whatever. The whole way there and the whole way back, these two drummers took the cassette tape and the boombox. And if you look at the track order, the first song is um, Big Money on side A, and the last song on side B is Mystic Rhythms. And all they did was play Big Money, flip the tape over, Mystic Rhythms. Flip the tape over, Big Money, flip the tape over, Mystic Rhythms the whole way there, the whole way back.
Nice.
So let me ask you this, and we're probably going to do shout-outs and close it out after this, but since we've been talking so much about Rush, what is your favorite Neil Peart recorded performance? Which track is your favorite drum performance? Not the best song necessarily, not the song that that got you laid, whatever it is, you know, the song that has your favorite drum performance from it.
Wow.
Second Nature. No, Open Secrets. Open Secrets.
What album's that from?
Hold Your Fire.
Okay. That's why I don't know it then, because I kind of listened to that album once.
Listen to that one. Open Secrets is like fire. But by the end of the song, blazing fire, man.
Okay, Splar. By the way, you can't pick Open Secrets. That one's been taken, so you have to pick a different track.
I'd probably go with YYZ. Now, it seems like a very obvious choice, but it's just stereotypical Peart on that. And everything that you could think of that would define him as a drummer is on that tune.
I agree, and I would add the moving pictures. I'm sorry, exit stage left live performance of YYZ with that drum solo. That's my favorite drum solo of his is the one off of that album. That to me, he perfected that drum solo with that, and he kind of expanded upon it some more. But yeah, I agree totally. You can find every bit of Neil Peart in that song.
Yep.
And that solo that he does in that song from that album, from that performance. Perfect.
Tim Kelway has a question. Tim, what's your question? So you could go on, Haze, because there's gonna be a Twitch lag from here to Australia.
No, that was great answer. That was YYZ.
I happen to be partial to what he did on Vital Signs.
Absolutely.
To me, it's almost Bill Bruford oriented in the way that he's like what I was talking about before, and you guys as well. He's playing a groove, but that's not a groove that anybody would think to play in any other situation other than that song, and probably nobody else but him would have thought of it.
Yep.
Absolutely. Vital Signs is an amazing, amazing drum part. I can't play that. There's things in there that I still can't do. It's generally the thing is that Neil Peart has something in there that you can't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like there's a Buddy Rich clip I remember seeing where I would have thought that it was edited somehow because it just didn't seem possible that a human being could do what I was hearing and what I saw him do.
I want to post that Tony Williams link that I'm talking about because he starts out with a great performance. But at some point, he gets out and he talks and then he takes some questions. People ask him great questions, just straightforward questions. They're not trying to, well, I'm a so-and-so and I've got a studio and I did some studio sessions. It's like, no. Somebody's like, hey, can you demonstrate some bop for us? And something like that. He gets behind the kit and bops for about 3 minutes. And it's like the best drumming I've ever seen in my life. And he comes out and he says, he's like, yeah, that was a little bit over the top, but you get the point.
Well, Tony was one of those guys too, and I think it had people have told me that it had to do with his age because when he joined Miles in the early '60s, he was only I think 17.
17.
Wow.
So he was still young enough that he was listening to, soul music, Motown, R&B. Then he was listening to the Beatles, Dylan, Hendrix. So he was like hearing these modern sounds, but he was familiar with the old school jazz. And Herbie in his autobiography said that he used to hang out with Tony on the tours to find out what Tony was listening to.
That's funny. Another one is Michael Shreve, Santana's drummer. He was like 17, 18 when he was doing that stuff.
And that was the first time on the Woodstock movie I'd ever seen a drummer play traditional grip.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, every drummer I'd seen before that, whether it was on film or people I knew, was always playing matched grip.
I still swear by matched grip. I mean, I would love to play traditional. I really contend that the reason traditional is around is because the drummers had the drum, the side over here to the side.
Yep.
They're marching, right? And that's why you do it, and that transfer to the drum kit. And if you want to play traditional grip, you want to tilt your snare drum away from you.
I've actually gone through phases of both. I'm very comfortable in traditional, but I usually play matched.
I think
I'm not like I'm an unorthodox drummer, so there was no reason for me to learn traditional. If a jazz drummer had taken me in, great, I would have learned traditional.
I think Eli.
Yeah, and my instructor was a jazz drummer when I was a kid, so I started out that way.
Awesome.
Eli, I think, switches, and I think he's told me the reason why, but I do not remember what it was, because I don't care about drummer talk. A few other names I want to mention. Are you guys familiar with Joey Barron and/or Paul Modian?
No, but I feel like I should be.
Are they in that mobster TV show?
I think that's what it is, man.
Well done, Swan. Those are two of my favorite jazz
show.
drummers.
The show sound. I hear the show talked up at the water cooler a lot.
Those are two of my favorite jazz drummers, but for that, the reason that I like almost any drummer is they've got this idiosyncratic approach where, you hear either of them play and it's like, oh, that's a Paul Modian thing. Paul does this thing where he'll play in time, but he's not playing time. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to hear a fucking cymbal going ding, 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 ding all the fucking time. We all know how to keep time in the band. Play your drums like an instrument. That's the thing I liked about Keith Moon would sometimes do that. He'd play a riff on the drums rather than playing time with accents.
That's how you find creative parts. Yeah, that's how you got to dig in there and just do something completely different and see if it sticks, and then you find magic that way.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't find magic, go back to what you were doing.
So I'm going to do some shout outs. First, I'm going to shout out.
While you're doing shout outs, what kind of kit, what's your brand, Solar Idolator?
So it's a, what do they call it? A jelly bean kit. I've got I think it's a Gretsch kick.
Oh, hang on.
A Yamaha floor tom, a DW rack tom, and the snare is, I think it's a Dixon.
Whoa.
I didn't see your question, Tim. Can you retype it? Because this slobs won't let me rewind
Zildjian,
in the chat.
Sabian, and I got a Wuhan cymbal.
I used to have a Wuhan. I like them. Yeah, I use Zildjian, Paiste, Sabian. I've got a Yamaha kit right now.
Nice.
I had an old Rogers. It's kind of like a crappy Rogers 5-piece.
I grew up playing a Rogers R360.
Okay. And this was like just a little 5-piece, always falling apart on me. The toms would just slide off, the floor tom would fall over. And one day I went to a used music store and I saw this Yamaha recording custom kit for about $800.
Oh, nice.
7-piece. I was like, yeah, I think they're birch.
We got Tim's question.
Okay.
How much do you charge to play on someone else's recording? Or if you don't do, session work like that, how much do you think a drummer should get for an average session?
People actually make money doing this?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I've never done that kind of work, so I wouldn't even, know where to begin even estimating something like that. I have played on other people's stuff, I've usually done it for free. Well, no, usually I've always done it for free. I've never gotten paid to record anything.
It's usually like just a privilege to get to record, you know?
Yeah.
Even though I'm not a drummer, I'm going to answer the question from my experience playing, the instruments I play. But if somebody wants me to do a recording, and similarly doing a gig, the price kind of depends on the music. If it's somebody who's doing something creative that I'm excited about, yeah, I'll do it for free. But if somebody's doing something where it's like, and it's something that Todd Kuhlman, great jazz bass player I got to study with, told me. It's like if somebody wants Jimmy Durso to add his bass lines to their part, that's different than if somebody just wants a bass player. So
Yeah.
if the first part, if I'm a creative part of the thing, then yeah, I'm down. But if somebody's like, yeah, I just want you to come down and play some root notes on my recording, then it's like, okay, what are you going to pay me? I'm not going to do that for nothing. Or if it's something that I'm not interested in, like the rare wedding gigs I get, I fucking show up, they put the music in front of me and I play it. So yeah, you got to pay me for that. I'm not going to leave my apartment to do that for free. But like a show where I'm sitting in with a band and we're doing like, some improv, say, okay, yeah, I'll do that for nothing.
Yep.
So that's how I treat it.
At the university that I went to, we had a recording industry department, an audio engineering department with studios. So the students, they were always needing bands to record. And during the 90s, I cut my teeth on a lot of recording sessions and really, I grew a bit of a reputation as being like a good drummer to bring into your session, like one that was going to do the job and have a good sound and even bring something to the table. So what happened to me is at one point, this is like around 94, 95, around 2003, I found myself back at that same university as a graduate teaching assistant teaching computer science. And I had an office. And one of my peer, he was also doing the same thing, like he was taking masters and so forth. And he was a guitar player. And he mentioned something about like, well, I'm going to like one of these REM students is going to record me and I need a drummer. And I said, dude, I'm your Huckleberry. Like I've got experience doing this. I like back in the 90s record all this stuff. And it was like, cool. Like, but he ended up not choosing me because we had different styles of music. And I was like, trying to explain to him, I'm a drummer, just because of what I listen to doesn't mean that I can't play, whatever. There was no skin off my ass because it's like, you've got to haul all your gear into the studio, set it all up. It's fun, but at the same time, you're like, it could be a bad session too. So,
yeah. In the 90s when I'd started teaching and people wanted to be in bands, first of all, this is funny. My students nowadays have no interest in playing with other people. They just play themselves, which I think is sad. But back then, there were times where, like, I'd have a guitar student. They'd say, "Oh yeah, me and this guy and this drummer have a band, but we can't find a bass player." And I'd be like, "Oh, you should talk to Billy. I think he's in your school." "Yeah, he doesn't listen to the same kind of music we do." And I said, "That's great."
Yeah. So some of the best bands that I've played with had just various backgrounds of people. Like I was talking about before, the band that I is my favorite band that I played with. The guitar player was a huge Rush fan. Emulated Alex Lifeson, played just like him. I mean, and the flute player was classical music. The bass player was all just R&B, funk, jazz. Michelle Naginicello, I can never pronounce her name. That's his favorite bass player, so that style of music. And then me, kind of punk, heavy metal kind of background. And the music was just amazing. Didn't sound like any of those styles at all because we each brought our own little piece in and it was completely different than what we listened to. And that's where the magic happens, when you just mix and match.
Well, that's what
Absolutely.
John Paul Jones always said about Zeppelin. Page was the blues guy in Led Zeppelin, but he said Plant was really into the West Coast hippie bands. Bonzo was into Motown, and Jones had come from a funk soul background. They ended up creating that music because they were all listening to different stuff.
By the way, John Paul Jones Zuma.
Oh, I
Amazing.
saw him on that tour. Yeah.
I did too. You saw that? Oh, that was he opened for King Crimson for him.
Oh,
Or,
I didn't see him open for Crimson. I saw him just doing his own show at a small theater.
Yeah, he opened for King Crimson, and I was reticent to go because well, not to see King Crimson, but I was almost tempted not to see John Paul Jones because I was thinking, well, what if it sucks? I would be devastated. No, he was amazing.
Well, that Zuma album was pretty interesting because he kind of made the bass lines the melodies.
Mm-hmm. And his drummer was a wonderful combination of like Neil Peart and John Bonham. It was really wild. This dubstep. Feels like a didgeridoo.
So I have a didgeridoo, and I really want to use it in a track, but I don't play it very well yet. I keep practicing. That instrument is so fun.
I follow a guy on YouTube who plays didgeridoo, and he live with a delay pedal, and he has a little MPC groove box that he finger drums on,
Nice.
and it's just performance. There's no sequence stuff, and he busts on the street in Japan. It's awesome.
Sweet.
And this is a Twitch streamer, you said?
He's a YouTuber.
Oh, okay.
I'll try to share on the Discord. Gotta remember to. Gotta remember
Oh,
everything.
no problem, Lennon, but I don't know why we don't get a clip of you playing piano.
Man, it was amazing. It was amazing.